The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod, and we're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, their headquarters in Tarzana, California. I'm so thrilled to be here with you today as we'll talk about throughout the day. You know, some days, right? It's that thing. I need to take a breath. You hear something or see something and it reminds you of the opportunities that you have in your life, and it puts things in perspective. So that's been a little bit my morning this morning, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. But what I want you to know is that we're going to be with you live for the next 3 hours. We're going to be talking about topics having to do with autism and how we can all be more effective, more efficient working with our children on the autism spectrum. Whether you're a parent, a teacher, a practitioner, if you're a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle, whoever you are, I know that if you're tuning into us right now, it's because there is a child in your life or a young adult or an adult that is somewhere on the autism spectrum, or you suspect is somewhere on the autism spectrum, and you want to be helpful. So you've come to the right place. We're going to be with you, helping you. We'll answer questions. If you have suggestions of topics that you would like for us to cover in the future, we'd love to hear that, because this entire show is meant to be a conversation. If you're wondering who I am, you know, one of the things that we talk about on the show endlessly is ABA. So you might think that I am somebody who went to school and learned about psychology, studied psychology and behaviorism. No, that would be false. I am not an ABA expert. I'm not a behavior expert. I'm not an autism expert. Like a lot of you out there, I was walking through my life minding my own business, right, so to speak, and excuse me, had this beautiful child, and that was progressing wonderfully, and then wasn't progressing wonderfully. You know, skills were disappearing into thin air from this child. I always used to say that it was like a thief was coming in the night and just stealing a little piece of my child, just enough so that I as a mother would notice, but such a small amount at a time that everybody around me, when I would say something's wrong, something's happening and I don't like it, and something's wrong, something's up with my child, and everybody would say, he's fine, he's fine. Until enough of him was gone that people started listening to me and going, you're right, all is not well here. And of course, my son was diagnosed with autism. He was 2.5. I think of that as being so late, but I know for a lot of you, you think, oh, if only we had been diagnosed at 2.5. So it's all relative, and I know that. Excuse me. And my son started ABA therapy just after his 3rd birthday, literally like 2 weeks after his 3rd birthday. At that point, he had virtually no functional communication skills at all, did not respond to his own name, had no language skills, was sparingly speaking. He had been speaking in full sentence before he regressed into autism, and so there were spare words here and there, but not to communicate. And it was a very frightening time, but we started ABA therapy from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, and I got my child back. And that's an amazing thing. And I come here on a daily basis to share with you the information that we got. And as I said, I'm not an expert. I like to consider myself an expert in my own child, but depending on the day, that can be untrue too. But I'm so passionate about making sure that you guys get the information that I had the benefit of. That they gave me this space and this time to be with you, and more importantly, they gave me access to anybody that we could possibly have a question, you or I. And I have the ability to call up pretty much anybody and either ask them to be here with us in the studio or have a conversation with them on the phone and relay the information to you. So that's what I am. Not an expert, I'm conduit. Think of me as the wire between you and whatever information you want, and please use me in that capacity, because that's what I'm here for. That's what I'm passionate about, is hunting down the answers that you need. So how can you get in touch with me? Myriads of different ways, and let's go through some of them. If you're watching us right now on Autism-Live, you will notice that above my picture, it will say either live or rebroadcast. We're live 3 hours a day. The rest of the day, we rebroadcast these shows. Either way, you can get a hold of us. If it says live, it's really easy. There's that box that says your questions. You can type in your question right there. It shows up here on my screen in real time, and we can be having a conversation in that way. If you're watching and it says rebroadcast, or you're watching us on any of the other ways that you can, and we'll talk about all those in a second, you can still get a hold of us, and the first best way is email. There's the email address for you. Very easy to remember, autismlive@gmail.com. You can send your email to us. We'll get it, and on the next live show, we will answer your question. But not only that, we'll send you a typewritten response as well. So don't be shy. I know instant gratification is a wonderful thing, but sometimes delayed gratification is really worth it. So send out that email to us. Give us the suggestions, your questions, your thoughts, your concerns, your complaints. We are here to serve you. So if we're not getting it done in some way, or there's something that's driving you crazy, please let us know. I especially want to know. Okay, still other ways to get a hold of us. If you want to call into the show, you can. We answer the phone from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, business hours, Pacific Standard Time. If you call at other times, you'll get a message and we'll get back to you, and that's fine. And if you call in during the live show, you have the option of being patched into the show, and you and I can be having a conversation right here. But there are other people waiting to take your call too. So if you're shy and don't want to call in during the live show, don't worry. Call in with your questions. That's what we're here for. You can also Skype in, particularly during the live show. If you want to Skype in and you've got video capability on your computer and you feel like you're having a good hair day, we can put you side by side with me and we can be having a conversation in that way. It's really fun. We have been featuring more and more bloggers on the show and more moms and dads, and we want to do more of that because you have wonderful stories to tell. So you can Skype in with us as well. Let's talk about some of the different ways. But well, first of all, there's Facebook also, that you can get a hold of us on Facebook. On Autism Live, it's a brand new page, you guys. So while you're there, if you'll give us a like, we really appreciate it. We feel like the sad little new person at the party. So give us a like. We like that. There's also Twitter. So you can find us at Twitter, Autism Live Show on Twitter, and I'm getting better at the tweeting thing, and you can check in with us there. Okay, but let's talk about all the different ways that you could be watching the show. You might be watching us on Blip TV. This is a direct response to you guys writing with suggestions that you said, I really want to be able to look at specific episodes in a library, go back, fast forward, pause it when my child has something that's going on that's important, and be able to come back right where I left off. So all the episodes now are on Blip TV. We are also on YouTube, and what I love about YouTube is that it's shorter versions of it. So it might be just an interview here about this with this expert, an interview here about that, or this topic that we're covering, so that you can really look and say, I've only got 5 minutes, and I want to watch something about toilet training, and you can go in and find that video and watch, and we're building up a huge library on YouTube. There are other ways to watch us. You can be watching us on iTunes. Again, you want to pause, stop, download it, take it with you, however you want to do that. And very soon you'll be able to get just an audio-only version. So if you're listening in the car, or, bless you, if you're out walking and you're listening, that's a wonderful thing to be able to do, so that you're doing 2 things at the same time. Multitask, right? We all need to be doing that. Okay. So lots of different ways to participate in the conversation, lots of different ways to be able to see us. We have more ways that we're bringing to you. If there's a specific device or thing that you like to watch and we're not showing up there, please write in and tell us, because we have given up on the idea of mind reading. But if you tell us, hey, I really want to be able to download this on this site, we'll make it happen, because that's what we're here for. All right, let's get on with the business of the day. We like to start every morning with something that we refer to as the jargon of the day. This is where we take one word, one phrase, one anagram at a time and try to demystify it, because we know that this is a jargon-intensive journey, isn't it? And if you don't know the jargon, if you haven't made friends with the jargon, it can be a pain in your you-know-what. You're someplace. I have an IEP meeting coming up on Wednesday. Can you feel the pressure? And you want to know what's happening at these meetings, right? You want to understand what's happening with your child. You want to understand what your rights are. You want to understand what your choices are, and people are talking to you and using words that you have no familiarity with. And you know how that is with jargon, that when somebody is used to the jargon, they forget that it's jargon. So they're just talking away and throwing 5 jargon words in one sentence and thinking that you would understand. And the reality is that we have to catch up. We have to make friends with the jargon, understand it. It will make things easier for us, but it's overwhelming, right? So we like to do the same thing when we teach our children. Take it one little piece at a time. We give you an actual definition and then give you a working definition so that at least you have a beginning understanding. And if you still don't get it, please don't stress about it, because some of these terms, you got to hear them over and over and over and then see it in context. And then the light bulbs go off and you say, okay, now I have it. And honestly, that's the way it is for our kids too. So we have to be patient with ourselves and try to reinforce that when we get these things, right? Okay, today's word, phrase anagram is really important that we understand. FBA. And you'll hear us talking about FBAs all the time on the show. This is one of the big ones that I really want you to make friends with. And what that stands for is functional behavior assessment. Okay, it's a multi-step problem-solving assessment process designed to determine the function of a behavior. Okay, if you're at all familiar with ABA, that definition may make a certain amount of sense. If you're not familiar with ABA and you're sitting someplace and somebody says, well, you know, your child is doing this and so we want to do an FBA, and they tell you it's a multi-step problem-solving assessment process designed to determine the function of a behavior, that might still be overwhelming. So let's take a look at what our working definition is. An essential process that, when completed properly, helps us to understand why a challenging behavior is happening, so that we can change it effectively. As we talk about ABA, we know that there's the ABCs of a behavior. Any behavior that you do, any behavior that I do, and any behavior that our children, on the spectrum or not on the spectrum, there's always the ABC of any given behavior. If I go to take a drink from my water bottle, there's the ABC of that. The A stands for antecedent, what happened before. The B stands for behavior, what the behavior actually is, and the C is the consequence. So if I'm sitting here and I grab my water bottle and I take a drink from it, the A is that it may be, wouldn't always be, that I was feeling thirsty. The B is the behavior, I took a drink from the bottle, and the C is the consequence, is that I am no longer feeling thirsty. Maybe. Or I may be even more thirsty. But whatever we do, there's the A, the B, and the C. And we like to talk about the fact that every behavior has a function, especially behaviors that we do over and over and over again. So I take a drink from the water bottle, and I do that many times throughout the day because I get a payoff for it. I feel better after I drink the water. My throat feels less parched. I just feel perkier. Do you ever feel like a plant that you're just starting to list because you haven't had enough water? And then you drink the water and suddenly, you're back in the game. So it's rewarding to me. And the truth is, the main principle that we're always going to filter everything through is that in order for any behavior to be maintained, it has to be reinforcing in some way. Okay. So what does this mean for us? That if we can get our heads wrapped around that easy idea, the world is our oyster, because if we can make something reinforcing enough, we can teach any behavior to our child. We can teach multiplication, because that's a behavior. Understanding and doing multiplication is a behavior when you get down to it. We can teach that if it's reinforcing enough to the child. Woohoo, right? Well, we can also teach a child to speak. In almost all cases. There are some cases where there is a physical, mechanical thing that happens that it's going to be more difficult. But even in those cases, we can teach functional behavior, or functional communication skills. We can do that. And that gives that child a voice. Great. We're going to use that to our advantage. What about on the other side of the equation? What about challenging behaviors that children engage in that we wish they didn't? That we'd like to see that behavior go away? Well, if we can figure out what the function of the behavior is, what the payoff is, and we can stem the source of that and say either we're not going to allow this to be reinforcing anymore, or we're going to find something and we're going to find something that's more appropriate, that serves the same purpose, and replace this behavior with this other behavior, then we can change that challenging behavior. And so we've got to figure out what the function of a behavior is. If a child is spitting, let's say that the child just spits over and over and over again. They're doing it, and maybe they do it sometimes in the morning, sometimes in the afternoon, sometimes in the evening, sometimes around this child, sometimes around that person. But the child is spitting, and it's become a challenging behavior. It's preventing the child from making friends. It's preventing the child from being able to do what they need to do in their given day. Challenging behavior. We want to get rid of it. Well, we can't just assume that we know what the function of the behavior is, right? Because we might be wrong. So what we do then is an FBA, a functional behavior assessment. Usually this is done by somebody who is a BCBA, a board certified behavior analyst, although not always. But I do think it's really beneficial, especially for challenging behaviors, to bring another pair of eyes in, and preferably somebody who's extremely experienced with behavior and autism. But if you are living someplace where that is just not a possibility, at least bring another pair of eyes in, because sometimes there's something happening with a behavior that you literally and figuratively cannot see. So a third set of eyes is a really good thing. But a functional behavior assessment, step-by-step process that determines what the function of the behavior is. When you know what the function of the behavior is, then you can create a behavior intervention plan which goes about systematically changing that behavior. We're going to stop it from being reinforcing what they were doing before, or we're going to give a replacement behavior, and we might do something before the behavior happens to change things so that the behavior isn't necessary. That's why we need to understand what an FBA is. The FBA is the golden ticket. Once you know what's reinforcing that behavior, you can change it. It's an amazing thing. Okay, so that's what an FBA is. And by the way, if you have a school-age child who's engaging in challenging behavior, and sometimes you just feel so frustrated, right? You go to school and, the teacher says, well, he's hitting, or he's kicking, or she's laying on the floor, or throwing tantrums, or running away, biting another child, any one of 1,000 other things on top of that, and you're like, oh no. And you're not there in the classroom, and you feel very powerless, right? But you do have the ability to request an FBA on that behavior. That's a great thing to do as a parent. You just put it in writing and say, who is the person at the school to do the FBA? They will have to come in and watch the behavior to see what's happening, to determine the function of the behavior, and help you to write a behavior intervention plan. It's so much better to do that, because then things can change instead of waiting, expecting something to change in and of itself. And then you sit down at the IEP and they say, well, this child is going to have to be in a different placement because of this behavior. You don't want that to happen. An FBA can start the ball rolling to have that be fixed. Okay, we're going to talk about FBAs a lot today. But we always have a question of the day for you. And our question today, well, always, every day, it's meant to get you thinking and communicating and sharing with us and with each other. And a lot of you answer the question of the day on Facebook. We love that because then you have an opportunity to interact with each other. Okay, the question of the day today is, what has been your greatest disappointment since your child was diagnosed? So I'd love to hear from you as to what that would be. I can tell you without a doubt, the biggest disappointment for me is realizing, and it's still, I think it's because I'm a very cynical person, don't get me wrong, but I want to put on rose-colored glasses and I want to believe that everybody's intentions are always good. I really do. I want to believe that. And I think that that's true most of the time. But the biggest disappointment for me is that not only are there people who don't care, right? There are people who are just apathetic and they don't care, but there are people in the world that you will stumble upon from time to time that not only are not interested in helping your child, but will make it harder for your child to get the help that they need out of some misguided, I don't know what. I don't know how they sleep. But there are people who don't have our children's best interests at heart. There are people who are trying to keep their jobs. There are people who are whose main thing is, I'm not going to rock the boat. I don't understand those people. I don't want to be friends with them. I don't want to surround my child with them. But sometimes you bump into them. And always when I bump into somebody like that, it is the biggest disappointment for me, because I'd almost rather deal with somebody who's apathetic than somebody who's actively trying to block our kids from getting the help that they need. And heaven knows they're out there. And it's so disappointing to me. And it's one of those things that I find overwhelming sometimes, because how do you overcome that? And the only thing that I've come up with to date is that you got to just keep plugging. You got to keep plugging and finding your way around those people, finding the solution, whether you have to step over them, step around them, but not giving your energy into them, because I think of them as black holes, that if you go there, you're going to get sucked in and there's no getting out and it's endless, right? So I'm always trying to go, oh, black hole over there. I'm going over here. I don't want to have anything to do with you. I don't like your energy. I don't like what you got going on. If, I always say, support or silence. That if somebody's giving me a hard time about something, I'm like, support or silence, because I'm going on with this. And these are people who cannot be supportive and cannot be silent. So they are to be avoided at all costs, right? Because, they just will suck the life out of you. That's my biggest disappointment. I want to know from you, what's your biggest disappointment? And, maybe if we all hold hands through this and say, okay, that person is a black hole, and we're all going to step around that person. I don't know, maybe eventually something will change. But in the meantime, we can't be held back by them, right? Absolutely. Okay, so very curious about what your biggest disappointments are. You can tweet, you can Facebook, you can email, you can phone, you can Skype, but we'd love to know what your biggest disappointment is. I think it's really good sometimes to get it up and out. Just say it, call it what it is, and then we can all move on, right? Hope so. All right, not to be a downer today, but it's important to say these things and to say the truth. I really believe that. Okay, we also always have a topic of the day, and I believe this is our topic our entire week. We have a short week, by the way, this week. We're only here live Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, because I'm away Thursday and Friday. But for this short week, our topic of the week is challenging behavior and what we can do about it. Because more than anything else, I want to give you the message that there is hope, there are solutions, and we don't ever want to be in a position where we just say, well, that's the autism, there's nothing we can do about that. I know for some of us that is a foreign concept, but think about if it's true. And you don't have to take my word for it. But if that's true, how much better would your life be? How much more could your child achieve? How much more could be done with your child? How many obstacles could you pull away in order to get your child to be the very best that they're capable of? And isn't that worth it? Isn't that a great idea? Isn't that something that you could get excited about? And so I ask you to come along for the ride. Don't believe me yet that it's possible to change these behaviors, but come and see the kinds of things that we're talking about. And when something strikes a chord, I hope that you'll give it a try, because life changes when you realize that these behaviors are malleable. We can change them. All behavior is communication. Our children are trying to tell us something. They're trying to convey something to us. And when they don't have other abilities, they're going to engage in some behavior that can be really, really, oh gosh, overwhelming, dangerous, discouraging, disappointing, terrifying, horrifying, right? But we don't have to settle for that. Nobody should be sitting there and saying, well, that's just the autism. Nothing we can do about it. Let's talk about what's possible. Stay tuned. Don't have to believe me, but at least be willing to hear what it is that we're talking about. That's all I'm asking in the beginning. Okay, so that's our topic for the day, and some of the different things that we're going to be hitting on today, a lot of different topics today. Stress, having success at school, we'll have a myth of the day, we're going to have a natural environment training tip that we're going to cover, a discrete trial teaching tip that we're going to cover, language tips, a whole bunch of different things, and at some point, well, throughout the whole day, everything that we're talking about, we're going to filter through dealing with challenging behaviors. So it's an exciting day. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we are going to talk about stress and how we can start to combat stress. So stick with us.
I am grateful for Autism Speaks because they allow families like me to have hope.
They're working towards having these children live better lives.
There's a space for you. Yeah, there's a world for you, and there's a community that is behind you.
And one that has really been able to be the singular voice for people who are involved with and who care about autism.
I do have autism, but I don't let that become a disability for me. Autism Speaks is going to continue to help those who need it, and just look at all the stuff they've done so far and you will be impressed.
3, 2, 1,
And you need to support the walks. We have to raise awareness, but we also have to raise funds to do the work.
I'm grateful for Autism Speaks for one main reason, is they are allowing me to focus on the research.
The work that Autism Speaks has been doing is critical for keeping autism research on the radar screen.
We proclaimed 2 April as the World Autism Awareness Day. I'm very proud of the UN and thankful Autism Speaks.
Getting the health mandate bill passed in New Jersey particularly, we needed to be able to make an argument, not just do this because it's the right thing to do, but do it because it's cost effective.
When everyone else told me nothing was wrong with my son, I got information from a website that told me something wasn't right.
I am so proud of Autism Speaks for creating these beautiful ad campaigns, which have reached people who are not affected by autism and have also created a greater climate of compassion and understanding.
It's been really great for Bachman to have gotten involved with Autism Speaks early on. I think everybody here feels like they really make a difference.
To make sure that we generate as much money as we can for Autism Speaks so we can all solve this puzzle together.
There's no way we could have come this far without our families, without our supporters to date, but there's so much farther we have to go. And everybody's invited to join this cause. We need all the help we can get to make the difference we know we can make.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. Want to do a quick shout out for those of you who we met at the Los Angeles Walk Now for Autism that we went to on Saturday. Myself and Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson and Emily Goodwin and Matt Scheller, who was doing the camera for us. We were there, and it was a lovely, lovely day. And we met so many of you, and if you were there and we had a chance to interview you, we're going to be showing those interviews on Wednesday. It was truly a very moving event, and it did not disappoint in terms of the sheer numbers of people who showed up. And there were several people that I talked to that it was their first time there at the walk, and I said, "What, you know, is this not amazing? And what's the best part about it for you?" And it's interesting that people said one of three things. They said, oh, the resources. It's just so nice to be here and learn all this information and see that there's this information for us to get in this very easy way at the resource fair. There were other people who said, I'm just overwhelmed with the emotion of seeing this many people, that we're all in this together, that I don't feel alone. Which, you know, it just always takes my breath away when I see that many people. And you know, there is that thing of, oh, I wish it did not have to be so many people, but there is comfort in numbers and knowing that other people are surviving and that there's a way, and you're not reinventing the wheel, you're not all by yourself. And of course, there were other people who were saying how lovely that we're here and we're raising money. And they raised well over $1 million on Saturday. So that's a wonderful thing. So big shout out to everybody that we met there. And of course, we'll be talking more about it throughout the week. And on Wednesday, when Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson is here with me, we're going to show you some of those interviews. And it may take us 2 weeks to show all of them because we talked to so many people, and you guys were truly lovely and gave us your time and your inspiration. It was just really, I get all verklempt. But it was lovely. It was a lovely, lovely day. It was hotter than you know what. And we all got a little sunburn, even though we were slathering ourselves with sunscreen. There was still sunburn at the end of the day. I don't know how that works. In any case, I wanted to take a moment to talk to you about stress. And from time to time, usually every Monday, we'll try to do a stress tip to remind everybody, including myself, how we need to. This is going to be a stressful journey. No matter what you do, you're going to have to deal with stress. And we know, right? I'm talking to the choir here, that the stress can stop you. And I mentioned that some stuff happened this morning that I particularly am glad to be here today to have a chance to talk to you. I was looking on Facebook, as I frequently do in the morning, and there are a bunch of you in the autism community that are sharing a very moving picture this morning of a little boy in an Iraqi orphanage that has lost his mother. I don't know if she's just literally lost or has passed away, but they gave him some chalk and he drew his mother on the floor so that he could sleep in her arms. And it's a picture of a child trying to snuggle with a chalk drawing. And of course, I was telling somebody about it, and they said, oh, does the child have autism? Because it's the autism community that's really sharing it in force. And I said, I don't know. I don't think that that's the big part of the message. This is the child who has lost his mother and is trying to cope. And it's bigger than, even though we're a bunch of autism moms talking to each other on Facebook, it's bigger than that. And I know so many of us were just overwhelmed and heartsick in seeing that picture. And I certainly felt this need this morning to do something. And I had one of those moments where it was just, all welling up, and I thought to myself, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to solve that. There's that moment where you go, well, I got to get a plane ticket. I got to go to Iraq and I got to find this child and bring this child back, right? But I don't know how to do that. I literally, there's like so many things you'd have to do to make that happen, and I don't know how to do that. I'm hoping that somebody does know how to do that, and if you know how to do that, let's talk. Because, and then you think about the fact that it's not just this child. There's children all over the world. There's probably children, in my community that need a home, and you get into that big, big overwhelm and the stress of all of it. And I have some wonderful people in my life who are so good at saying yes, but when that happens, when it all starts to, as it does for all of us, the stress of autism, we go, well, I got to do this and I got to do that and I got to help these people and I got to, and I got my child, and it all just starts to mushroom. And what I've been told over and over and over again, which really works for me, and I know it works for a lot of people, is instead of thinking and having it all go completely outside yourself, just stop for a moment and say, I have today. What can I do today? And I have opportunities today to help myself and to help the people in my life. And what can I do today? To ask yourself that question, what can I do today? And, when I asked myself that this morning, because I was really getting into that place where I wasn't breathing, because all I could think about was this child and how grateful that I am that that's not my child, but that it doesn't matter. I mean, this child is all of our children, right? And I have to, put my faith in the fact that there's somebody closer who's going to be able to do something or to tell me through this medium what I can do. And I mean it sincerely. If somebody knows exactly what to do, write in and tell me. But in the meantime, what can I do today? I thought to myself, well, I can. First line of defense is make sure that I take care of myself so that that isn't my child somewhere down the road, which means managing my stress. And the second thing that I can do is that I can come here and tell all of you, because together maybe there's something that we can figure out. And then the third thing is to be helping people that I have the ability to touch today. The children in my life, and that I have the ability and to look at who needs what here. And that maybe it's that thing of, the butterfly in the forest that creates the wind that changes the rest of the world, right? And I do think it's important when we're talking about stress to bring it back to the level of this moment. That so often we project into, well, what's going to happen next month? Or we go back into, well, what happened last week? But when we stay in this moment right now, and what can I do? What is possible right now, instead of, getting into all those other moments and possibilities and things that are past or things that haven't even come yet? What can I do right now? And sometimes that means filling out the paperwork for your child to get a certain service. And sometimes it means doing the dishes. My niece is very fond of saying, when things get overwhelming, focus on loading the machines, if you have machines. Stuff in the dishwasher, stuff in the washing machine, or just washing 5 dishes if you don't have the dishwasher. Keeping it all, and my favorite phrase, and really what I'm getting at here, in Finding Nemo, when Dory says, just keep swimming, because we have to keep moving. What the stress can do to us sometimes is overwhelm us into paralysis, right? I know I'm not the only one, and it does that to me. I get so that I just suddenly stop and I can't move anymore. So keeping ourselves in the present, that's the best possible place for us to be for our kids. It's the best possible place for us to be for ourselves. And, it starts at home, and being present for our kids. What do our kids need today? And if we can get that under control, then we can look a little bit outside and say, if we're helping our child today, and then what can we do from there so that we don't get into overwhelm. And honestly, my plan today was to be talking to you about laughing and keeping a sense of humor. But I think that comes part and parcel with being in the moment. When we're in the moment, we can see things and know that they're not necessarily going to last forever, and not be hung up on the past, so that we can get to the place where we can appreciate what's happening now and laugh about it. As we've talked to some of our bloggers that get more attention, and asked them, what do you think it is? Why do you think people are reading your blogs? And they all say the same thing, that they're keeping a sense of humor about it. And I think I appreciate that. I think that you guys do too, that we can't some of what we have to do and some of what we have to face is so uncomfortable and so hard and so challenging. And it's so hard to live in that space 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? But if we keep a sense of humor about it, then things get better. I have shared before that on the day that my son was diagnosed, and, you know, it was a rough day. It was a rough day for both my husband and I, and it was a rough day for us together. But eventually we sat down that night and we watched, I don't know why, but we had, somebody had given us a DVD that was Conan O'Brien. It was just Triumph the Insult Dog. And it was like a marathon of Triumph the Insult Dog. And we sat down to watch it and laughed until we cried. And what a wonderful, wonderful thing to be able to do that, to laugh until we cried. And it was such a release. So any opportunity that you have to laugh, to be in the moment and say, yes, this is happening, and we're going to laugh about this in 10 years from now anyway, so why not laugh about it now? One of the things that we did on the walk, and we'll show this interview on Wednesday, and I can't remember their name, isn't that terrible? But there was a book that a guy had written with his mom, and we did the interview, we'll figure it out who it is, about the funny things that happen when we're on the spectrum. It had cartoons and drawings, and we'll make sure that we show that to you on Wednesday because I thought it was particularly clever and fun. So in any case, keeping the sense of humor, staying in the moment, asking yourself, because there's so many things to think about, what can I do today? What's right in front of me that I can do? And it's going to be different for all of us. And if it's literally, you know, picking up the toys or picking up half of the toys, great. If it's calling and getting yourself on the list so that you're starting ABA therapy, make the phone call. What can you do today? I do think that when we get into action, it's that much easier. The stress gets reduced. It's when we sit and think and stack and, you know, it builds up. And of course, the other thing, and this goes hand in hand with the sense of humor too, find your way to download it. That I like to write. I write letters to people that I never send, and later on today I'm going to feature an open letter that is not to be sent that somebody has written online about autism. But writing the letter that is never going to be sent and saying all the things that you really want to say and then looking back on it and laughing, right? Very beneficial. Oh, I have written some letters. Someday there may just be a show about that. But it'll have to be when I don't care about lawsuits anymore. Right? Okay, let's take a little bit of a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about some sneaky things to do for your child to be more successful at school, so stick with us.
Mostly the behavior started at night, but it was invading the day, where he would just speak one syllable and babble and pace around.
When she was a year old, she lost speech. She did never seem to request me for anything, even for food. He told me over the phone that I should just put her in an institution. I was devastated. What's an institution? A hospital. Yeah, isn't that nice?
He told me that it was possible or likely that Ruffin would never be employed, that he would never work productively, that he would not know that I loved him, nor would he love me, nor would he be likely to marry.
There's a 50% chance that he won't be able to talk at all, but if he does talk, he will only be able to, you know, make simple desire requests. I want, things like that. And probably by the time he was 10, he'd be in a home.
Doreen told me that he would recover, and Doreen told me that he would go to regular kindergarten.
I really have a very normal kid now, and lots of normal worries, but not extraordinary ones.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're webcasting to you live from the headquarters of the Center for Autism and Related Disorders in Tarzana, California. And I promised you that we would talk a little bit about some sneaky things that you can do to help your child enjoy and have a more successful time at school. And let's talk about, there's really two different scenarios. The scenario where things are going pretty well at school and you like the staff that your child is working with, and you see that in general they get it and they're wanting to help you and they're wanting to help your child, right? And if you're fortunate enough to have that situation, there are things that you can do to help yourself to make it smoother for your child, to make it easier, right? We've talked about making sure that your child gets up and goes to school in a really good mood, and that you work for that to happen, and that's a very cool thing. But there are some things that you can do in building relationships at school that will help you. Now, this is not under the heading of making yourself more overwhelmed, so let's talk about a bunch of different ideas and know that you're gonna pick something that works well for you. But somebody had said this to me when my son was starting school, and they said, you're going to be adversarial at some point. You're going to be asking for things that somebody doesn't want you to have, or that doesn't want to do, or whatever. So find all the ways that you can ingratiate yourself to the school, whatever it is. But make sure that it's something that is reinforcing for you, because you're going to want to keep it up to some level. So in the beginning, I volunteered a lot when my son was going to kindergarten. And yes, it was really, really difficult, because what would have been great would have been if I was making a whole lot of money while he was at school. That would have been an absolutely fabulous thing. But for my circumstances at that period of time, it wasn't working out. So instead of sitting home and thinking about that, I volunteered a lot in his classroom. And it was great because I got to meet a lot of the other parents that year. I got to meet a lot of the children that, they cycle in and out of his classrooms, because his school is pretty big. And I got to meet a lot of the teachers, and I started to form relationships, and I understood what was happening with my child at school. So I had a very informed opinion. And I personally found that really reinforcing. I love to work with kids. So for me, that was a good time, that I would love to be there and help them doing their art projects. Sometimes when I couldn't go, my husband would go, and he loves to work with kids too, but it was a little stressful for him, especially when because he wouldn't be in charge of the craft that he was doing. He would just be handed the craft, and they would say, here, have him do this, this, and this, and he would get centers of 6 kids at a time, and then they would rotate and come to you. And now for me, that's extremely pleasurable. For my husband, it was a little on the stressful side. So you got to think about what works well for you, but there's lots of different ways to volunteer your time. And I'm sure that if you ask the teacher and said, here's what I'm good at, they would be thrilled to give you something. I know one mom that the teacher would send home things for her to cut out, because she had 2 little ones still at home and she couldn't be there volunteering, and she said, it's really important to me to be involved. And so while she was sitting with her husband at night, and after the kids had gone to sleep, and it was her relaxing time, she would just sit and cut things out. And for her, that was really reinforcing, and the teacher just so appreciated it. And as a former teacher, I can tell you, it's not a thing of having favorites, and it's not a thing of, being less interested in one child as opposed to the other. But there is something about when the parents are not just complainers, that gives you a level of patience to deal not only with the parents' requests for things that they want that are separate, but also for the child. You see that everybody's trying to make it happen. Yes, there are other kids that you see the parent is not, and you want to give those kids attention. So I don't know that it's, this is not like, oh, do this and everything's going to be hearts and flowers and roses for your child, but I think it adds to a feeling of well-being and is really helpful to you and to your child. And there's something about, especially when the kids are littler, when they get to know that person's mom, there's more things to be talked about. Do you know what I mean? That kids have conversations and, oh, your mom is here today. It gives them a reason to be talking to your child and interacting with your child. I think it makes a difference all the way around. And there were different things. There were so many things. Our PTA does so many different activities, and it overwhelms me. Can I just tell you that I am not good at the PTA thing? And if you are, that's a great place to be, because you will get to know other parents. You'll get to know the ins and outs of what's happening at the school. You'll get to know the ins and outs of the decision making. So if you're good at the PTA thing, I encourage you to do that. That's time well spent. You will forge relationships that will help your child along the way. I am not good at that stuff, like the whole bake sale thing. Or, you know, being the person who is in charge of some event and having to wrangle other parents. Oh, it's just so not a good thing, not a good match for me. But what I did do was that I went to the PTA and said, hey, here is what I do. Here's what I would like to do. Where would you like me to fit in? And because I used to teach theater, I said, I'd like to direct a play. And they said, great, you're in charge of this thing. And now I do it every year with the fourth graders. My son isn't in fourth grade yet. He'll be in fourth grade next year. But can I tell you the benefits of having invested that amount of time? And it's just like a month and a half that I come in after school and work with the kids for about a month and a half. And it's a very stressful time in terms of I got to really manage my time during that month and a half. But all of these kids know me, and so they know my son, the older kids, and they look out for him. So when he's on the playground, and we recently went through this thing where there was just a little bit of bullying, and some of the older kids stepped in and said, no, that's Jem, and he's cool, knock it off. And they knew him because I had worked with them. So it has benefits like that, plus which I think people see that you're trying to be part of a solution as opposed to part of the complaint. There's so much to complain about, right? Because there's no money for anything. We could all just sit and complain endlessly. But if we get part of the solution, now, as I said, I didn't come up with this idea. A bunch of moms had said to me really early on, all these different ideas, that there's one mom that she likes to throw 2 pizza parties for her child's class. One at the beginning of the year, one at the end of the year, and says, says to the teacher, I just want to have a pizza party because I know that, we come with some extra things, and her child, it was so appreciated. The parents said, thank you, that's so sweet. And the kids, there was a certain social status that her child achieved because there were going to be 2 pizza parties, and the kids all appreciated it. It's just very interesting. And I know these are sneaky sorts of things. We like to make sure that we gift. We started early on because one of the things that I could do was put together, I love to take pictures, and I love to put together slideshows. So I do a slideshow right before they go on the holiday break in the mid-year, and I do a slideshow for them at the end of the year of all the pictures of everything that they've done. Now I'm not able to be in the classroom as much because I'm here, and because he's older and they don't let you in the classroom as much, but I have other people taking pictures, and then at the end of the year I just put the slideshow together, and the kids love it and the parents appreciate it. And also I think that teachers love to have us in the classroom because they know that they're going to get this wonderful slideshow. It's bribery, you guys. But the point is, if things are going fairly well, we know that in order for a behavior to be maintained, it has to be reinforced. Let's reinforce a school that's doing really well. Let's make sure that we're saying thank you in all the different ways. Now, that doesn't mean go spend a whole bunch of money, and that doesn't mean donate time that you don't have. But figure out what's right for you. One of the other things that I love to do, it's Teacher Appreciation Week this week, and in July, I love to go to one of those big stores where they're having the penny sale, and they're selling, erasers for a penny, and they're selling pencils for 10 cents, and I literally will spend $5 and just come home with a bag of supplies. And I wait because tomorrow is Teacher Appreciation Day, where we're supposed to donate school supplies. And I can give a huge bag of stuff for $5 that would have cost probably $100, and I spent $5. And yes, I got to keep it from July to now, but it still is a good thing. So find the way, when things are working, find the way to reinforce. Now, for those of you on the other side of the equation where you're just beating your head against a wall and things are not going well at school and you don't feel like the teacher is concerned and or doesn't care or is doing things the wrong way, or maybe the teacher's fine but the aide isn't, or the principal isn't, it's like not working, then it's time to take a whole different tact, and that's when you want to get just incredibly consistent and be incredibly legal, because you're going to try to move as soon as possible to something better. Whether that means moving school districts, whether it means moving just to another school within the school district, or moving to another teacher. Because again, and I said this earlier today, that, you know, the big disappointment for me is that there are people who just don't want to be helpful. In fact, they want to be a hindrance. We want to step around those people as fast as we can. And the best way to do that is to cross your T's and dot your I's. We had Dr. Michael Dorsey in the studio with us, I think it was last September. And he is considered widely the expert on placement, appropriate placement for children. And so he gets called in to testify, sometimes for school districts, sometimes for parents. And we were asking him, you know, what advice do you have for parents at IEPs, or if they don't like the placement and they're going in for the meeting, what's like? And he said, you know, and this is, by the way, in his words on YouTube, but I'm going to paraphrase here, that the most efficient way that he has of figuring out, you know, because sometimes it'll be like a parent complaining, saying the school isn't doing their job, and the school saying we are, you know, and how do you decide? And he says the litmus test that levels the field, and he knows exactly what he's dealing with, is to go to the school and say, here's what I would like for you to do. I want you to give me a breakdown in 20-minute increments of what the child is doing throughout the day, and for each 20-minute increment, how that matches up to one of their IEP goals. And if you could send that over to me, I would really appreciate it. Now, if they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, this is an easy document to generate, and they go, oh yeah, absolutely, here it is. If they are not doing what they're supposed to be doing, then it's going to be Scramble City, because that's a reasonable request, to ask for the child's schedule broken down into 20-minute increments, and for each 20-minute increment to have it match up to one of their IEP goals. As a former teacher, and I have taught in the classroom, mostly I taught college, but I have taught in the classroom with younger kids as well. We have standards, whether you're going by the state standards or, you know, they're trying to make national standards, and you have to be able to match up what you're doing with a goal. So it isn't just our kids on the spectrum, right? That is a reasonable request of any teacher. And a teacher who knows what they're doing is going to be able to give that to you and say, here is exactly what we're doing and why. This, you know, today's lesson was about this, which matches up to, you know, 2.4, the state standards for social studies, or whatever it is. Totally reasonable request. And for our kids, you know, it needs to match up to the IEP goals. You're not asking for the sun, the moon, and the stars. It's completely reasonable. And if you need to escalate things to go to court or whatever, and if they're not able to provide this document in a really timely fashion, the school will know that they are in deep kimchi, as a friend of mine likes to say, right? They have to be able to do that. That's completely reasonable. And if they can't, you have such recourse. Now, it could be that you say that and they go, you know, we're not doing that. And they're going to have to give you the document, so they're going to have to create one, which may be enough to kickstart them doing what they're supposed to be doing. But once you have this document, and if you still think that they've totally generated this thing that's a complete and total falsehood, all you need to do then is tell them you're having somebody come by. You're probably going to have to pay somebody to come in and observe, to see, in fact, that what's happening on the paper is actually happening. They're probably only going to let you observe for a small amount of time, but it's going to force them to put up or shut up, right? And if they can't generate that document, then you're going to be able to go to the district or whoever and say, it's not happening. I need to be moved. None of us wants this to be litigious, right? So I need for my child to be, you know, Our federal government has law, FAPE, free appropriate public education. And if they don't have this document, if they can't generate the document, then what's happening is not appropriate, because it doesn't match the goals in the legal document, the IEP. So don't be afraid to step up. Yes, it's gonna get adversarial, but you know what? If things aren't going well and that isn't happening in your child's classroom, your child needs to go someplace else. And I know many of you have written in and said, I gave up and I'm homeschooling. And bless you, you are a better person than I. But I would also say to you, because there's an expense to homeschooling, and if they couldn't provide you with that document, you have got some legal standing, and talk to a lawyer about whether you can have the school pay for whatever instructional thing is happening at home. Just a word to the wise. So if you're having a good school experience, reinforce them. And if you're not having a good school experience, consistency them to the 9th degree, right? Just keep plugging away and saying, well, show me the documentation. What are you doing? And how is it working? And how are you graphing it? How are you deciding that it's working? And if they're not doing it, they're not going to be able to show it to you, and you'll be able to move to a different situation. Okay, it's time for the A word, and it's Monday, so we get to see a new episode. This is the wonderful documentary that's being made at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. We're following a little boy, Jack Riley. He's been diagnosed with autism, but he's about 6 months into therapy, and he is seeing some real progress. That doesn't mean that everything is wonderful, but he's speaking in some sentences, and he's starting to enjoy playing one-on-one and interacting with people. So let's see what Jack Riley is up to this week.
Social ID questions are just basic questions that anyone would ask you, like what's your name, what's your age, how are you, and we're teaching him, to reply, my name is Jack Riley, I'm 2 years old, and when we ask him, how are you, he's supposed to say I'm fine or I'm good, just so it's a conversation starter. I didn't probe through what he knows yet, but he might surprise me. I don't know. He always does. How old are you? 2. Oh, wow. 2 like this? Can you do it? Oh, that's a good try. Can you do the fingers? You trying? 2. There you go. What's your name? Jack Riley. All right, well, I guess he knows those. Hey, what's your name? My name is Jack Riley. Yay! There's Jack Riley! Woohoo, you're so smart! You're so smart! Poof. Yay! Where's Jack Riley? Oh, there he is! Should we show Dad your cool new trick? Hey, Jack Riley, who is that? It's Susan. Yeah, who's this? Who's this? It's Daddy. Yay! Who's this? It's Nose. No, who's this? Who's this? It's a baby. It's a bat. It's a dog. And my time will come. It's son. Tiger. His mom was saying he was getting so excited that he's discovering new like phonetic sounds on his own, like with things that he knows, like dinosaur and pancake. Hey, what's this one? Duh. Dinosaur. Good job. What about buh? Book. Good job. How about this one? Book. Wow, good. Book. What about this? Car. What about this one? Book. Good. Nice. What about this guy? Jack Riley, where'd you go? What's this? It's a potato. Yeah, so. It's a potato. Let's go for a bike ride. There he goes. Wow. Suzanne's so impressed. Oh, say hi. Oh. Are you all done, Jack? No, stop. Are you all done? Then you need to sit on the bike. Come sit on the bike.
Can't pretend to play.
No. No, Stop. Come back.
Jack Riley requests the bike but doesn't play with it. Since he is no longer being compliant with Jessica, they leave, which begins a tantrum.
Okay, then we're all done. We're all done then. Come on.
Honey, what's up? My son's auditioning for a fellow right now.
It is a fight.
Jack, calm down. Okay, come here. I forget. I'm trying to be the hero.
Mike is supposed to ignore the tantrum because giving him attention may prolong the tantrum and make it worse.
Every time we asked him to do anything, he sat down. And sort of, not violent is the wrong word, but roughly, to where, he almost threw his head back on cement a couple times. Where I grabbed his arms and lowered him because he was going to throw his head back. I thought, I have some tools that I use from you guys. None of them worked. The only thing I could do, I think it was more energy. You know what I mean? He's cooped up, and then there's no way I'm doing what you asked me right now. I got to see lawn. I think he just was like, I'm not doing what you do. I'm going to play right now. And so we tried that to where differentiate. If you go on the lawn, you can play, but you're going to walk with me, and then you can play. No, it did not work. It was sort of a setback in my mind. Like, I hadn't seen this behavior. So I had no idea what to do.
Oh, okay. Well, that's why we're here.
I know. So not to make it dire, but yesterday to me was sort of a rough day. It was surprising to me. I know I make a lot of mistakes when I'm with him when he does stuff like that, but I know somewhere in here the tools are there. But yesterday I was like, they just all went out the window because he was just nothing was working. He was the boss yesterday. I couldn't figure it out. You do the A-word thing, and sometimes I'm set back when he does something brilliant. He is who he is, and he'll be who he'll be. But I want him to go on dates and not be necessarily the 180 IQ guy who's focused on one thing. He does things that I just go, look at Cheryl and go, oh my God, I don't think I can do that now.
Okay, so much to talk about. Let's start with in the beginning when they were talking about the personal information. Jessica was talking about it, calling it social ID questions. And if you guys are using skills, and I use skills at home, it's called the personal information, and it's in the social curriculum under social language. And there are a whole set of lessons that can help us to teach things to our children. But this is why it's so important to probe, and it's so important for us to remember that there's no two kids exactly alike, and there's no such thing as a cookie cutter approach, right? This is why we do probe, because she said, I don't know what he knows and what he doesn't know. So she said about probing. Remember that probing is when we're not going to attempt to teach. We're just testing to see, does the child know this? Does the child not know this? So she asks the first question, and she says, how old are you? And he says 2. He knows he's 2. But then she probes to see, can he do, because he's going 2. I'm a claw. But she's probing to see, can he do the fingers? And I'm going to guess that they're going to work on the finger thing, that wasn't quite there. But he knows that he's 2 years old. Now, I think he's very soon in the video, he's already 3 now in the real time, but soon he's going to turn 3. Now, this is a perfect example of you go, oh, well, great, he's got 2, we don't need to work on that, but it's very possible that as he gets ready to turn 3 and as he turns 3, they might need to work on that for a short period of time. Now, this is not heart-stopping. It's not the end of the world, because it's exactly what would probably need to happen with a regular 3-year-old, with a child who is typically developing. I was just at a birthday party last week for a child who had been 2 and was turning 3, and I was talking to him, totally typically developing child, and I was saying, how old are you? And the first time he responded, we're at his birthday party, although he'd had his birthday like 3 days before. And he said, I'm 2. And I said, no, you're not. Now you're 3. And he kind of looked at me and he was like, and he said, I 3. Yes, I 3. And then he set about trying to figure out, how to do his fingers. And I'm sure, it's like 2 weeks later now. And so he probably has it now. But there is that transition. My goodness, I have a birthday and somebody asks me how old I am and I start to say last year's, right? What's great about this, though, is that, he's on a trajectory that's more typical developing now, that okay, he knows 2, but we'll have to work on 3 a little bit. We would have to do that with pretty much any child. Okay, but I love that, that she celebrates and sees that he does know his own name. And then we go into this moment where he's on the bed and he's jumping up and down on the bed, and he's very happy because he's doing the thing that he wants to do. And Daddy comes in and she says, should we show Daddy your new trick? Yes! And he's jumping around and she says, okay, so what's your name? Jack Riley. And, who's that? It's Daddy. And do you notice that he's not just saying Daddy, he's now doing the complete sentence saying it's Daddy. Because they taught him the labels for things, and then they taught him to add it's. And now they're adding it's when it's an object, right? But so he says, it's Daddy. And then she says, so who's this? And the humor comes in there because he says, it's a nose. And our kids are really specific sometimes, right? He's been working on nose, and so he thinks that she's pointing to the nose. Well, the great thing about that is that he's listening and paying attention, right? But he doesn't yet know. He can say, I'm Jack Riley, that's Daddy, but he doesn't yet know, and he said it's Suzanne who's running behind the camera, but he doesn't yet know her name. So he fills in the blank with something else. And it's hysterical and it's funny, and they get to have a good moment of talk about being in the present. We talked about this just a few minutes ago about how we have to keep our sense of humor and find these things funny and celebrate them. But we're going to be talking a little bit later about natural environment training. And we've seen Jessica sitting with him, and they're not at a table because he's so little. She keeps the cards and stuff on her book and will say, give me this, and that's the DTT. But what we saw there was a lovely little slice of NET, that natural environment training that we're going to be talking about a little bit later, where we take some of the skills that we've been working on and put them in the natural environment. It's very child-driven, so the child is deciding what they want to do, and we're just throwing these things in while they're doing other things. So he's bouncing on the bed, and she's taking the opportunity to teach. The perfect example of natural environment training. He's very reinforced. He's the one who's calling the shots. Love when he's there in silhouette and saying potato. Now, if you remember, just a few weeks, a couple of months now at this point, when they were working with Jack Riley, he was not speaking, and when they were starting to teach him labels, it was not clear what he was saying. But they've been working on things. They've been working on the oral motor at the same time that they've been working on the different labeling things. A perfect example is that she's showing him the dinosaur and saying it's a dinosaur. So he's saying it's a dinosaur. And then she goes on to, what's this? He says it's a ball. And something else, it's a whatever it is. But so and he's not going to walk around the rest of his life saying it's a ball, but that's an exercise to give more opportunities to get that plosive, the so that his musculature is catching up, which then we hear in his very distinct, it's a potato. It's a potato. But his artic is really coming along because they've worked on it in this way. And when you get that, it becomes that much more reinforcing to communicate because people understand what you've said, so your needs are much more likely to be met. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Okay, then we get into this fabulous moment. And I love this about the A word, that we get to see the real deal, what it's like, the real deal as a parent, and sometimes how frustrating it is, right? So here's Jack Riley, and everything's been going so wonderfully, and he wanted to play with a bike, and then he's just not happy. And he's not complying, he's not listening, he's running away and not responding when they say stop. So they say, okay, you know, if you're not going to be compliant, we're going to put the bike away. And she says to say bye-bye to the bike. Well, he does not have the language to say, wait a second, I'm going to be compliant. I'll do what you ask me to do, and I'll, you know, let's have do-overs. But wait, because in another year, that's exactly what that child's going to be doing. He's going to try to negotiate his way out of that. But in this moment in time, he's not being compliant. They're not able to work on the things that they want to work on. So it's time to say bye-bye to the bicycle. And this is not a punishment, by the way, because from time to time we have to put things away. And so we're learning those skills, right? That, you know, in just another year and a half, he's going to be at school, and we're going to finish with a center, and it's going to be time to move to something else. And we need to learn to have our feelings about, we're sad to put this away, but it needs to go away. That's just a life skill, not a punishment. But they're going back inside to take the bike back in, and he is unhappy about it, right? He's not the captain of his own destiny, but he's seeing that sometimes he can be. And he doesn't have enough language and enough social skills and enough cognitive and EF skills at this point to negotiate his way out of it. So what does he have at his disposal? He can cry, he can whine, he can be very unhappy, and if he gets attention for that, woohoo, right? He's winning. And you see the very typical response from the dad that we all do. Bless his heart for being so honest about it. But, you know, here's the child, and the child's crying and whining, and the therapist is not paying any attention to it and going about her business and saying, do you want to play with this? She's not completely ignoring him, but she's ignoring the behavior. And the dad says, Jack, calm down. Shh, you know, stop, right? And please, do we not all do this? I still, from time to time, do this. And my husband will tell you that he does this sometimes too. And then you see the dad go, ugh. And Jessica says to him, you know, let's not give it the attention. Because we feed attention to it, this behavior is going to stick around, and it's not a behavior we want. If we just, you know, he's having his feelings, he's unhappy about it, he has no other means of expressing it, and so we just go about and create other things, and, you know, eventually he sits down to play a game, and he's okay, and the dad's still beating himself up about it, saying, you know, we went to this thing, and I didn't hear what it was that they went to, but he said we had a really bad day yesterday, that he would sit down on the concrete and throw himself back almost to the point where he would hit his head. He wanted it to be his way. He wanted to do it his way, and it felt like a setback because we've had so much progress. And I tell you, this is the core of the honesty of why this project is so important, because it's reality. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Your child makes progress and you go, wow, what isn't possible for my child? All those lovely animations there, you know, my child's going to be a football star, my child's going to go on dates, my child's going to have 180 IQ, my life is going to be good. And then you hit a day where your child goes, I don't think so. I am not listening to anything you say. In fact, I'm going to decide to throw a tantrum that I haven't thrown for 6 months, because that's development. It is. It's the same reason why people have children that are typically developing and everything goes da-da-da-da-da, and then suddenly your child's a teenager and you go, what happened? Why are we always arguing? Because they're asserting their independence. They're seeing in this new world of what you just showed me was that if I do this, I get this. Well, I'm going to try some other things here. I want to broaden my horizons, so I'm going to see what I can get. And if I can throw myself on the concrete and I'm the boss, that's not a bad choice, because I want to be the boss. And yet, as parents, we go, what just happened? What just happened? Things were clipping along well, and why is this happening? If we can remember that behavior is communication, and sometimes our children are just going to communicate with us, I need more control. And sometimes we're not going to agree with them, and we're going to go, nope, sorry, veto, not happening, right? But if we understand that that's what's being said and that's what's being done, I had shared that last fall we were being interviewed by a fairly big network about autism and our experience, and there were other kids that were there as well. It was a really hot day, and my son was doing really, really well until it became his turn to be videotaped. And my child, who had been so well behaved in this heat, and even I had gotten to the point where I was crabby, all of a sudden now it's his turn to be videotaped, and he just started to act like a complete and total snot. Like a complete and total snot. And I was looking at him going, who are you? And what have you done with my child? Like, what seriously is up with you? And he was just being a buffoon. To the point where they wanted a shot of him on a swing set, and he was on the swing set, and by accident his foot hit some sand, and the sand kind of went up, and it sort of hit the cameraman just in the legs, and the cameraman kind of made a face at him and kind of brushed it away. Oh, well, then we were off and running. And my son deliberately kicked some, I'm appalled even saying this to you even now, deliberately kicked some sand at the cameraman holding this multi-$1,000 piece of equipment. And I thought the top of my head was going to come off. And it was one of those moments where you go, okay, everybody stop everything. And I said to the guy, stop everything. Time out, and it probably wasn't the best thing in that moment, but you have to realize that my child is verbal enough now that I can say to him, what's going on, what is happening right now, and that he can give me an answer. And I said, okay, stop everything. If you're trying to get my attention, oh, now you have it. And I said, what is going on? And he looked at me and he said, I'm really hot and I'm really tired and I'm really thirsty. And I said, it was just one of those things. And I said, of course you are. Then what do you need to do to ask for those things? And he said, oh, right. Can I have a break? I need to go get something to drink. He hadn't felt empowered in that moment because there were all these people, and he had an awareness of that this was a pretty important thing, and he'd been waiting around for his turn. And it just so happened that his turn came. You know how that is in real life. Then all of a sudden you have to go to the bathroom. And sometimes you don't feel like you can, right? But he needed a drink and he didn't feel empowered to ask for it. It didn't really occur to him. So he started engaging in some behavior that I'd never even seen before. Forget revert to behavior. And he said, we can take a break, but they're like, filming right now. I said, it doesn't matter. We can take a break. We can go get a drink of water, but you need to use your words. And he went, oh, okay. And he apologized to the cameraman, and we went and got a drink of water. And then he was happy to be filming. But our kids don't always know when they have power and when they don't, and they don't know how to use it appropriately. And so as our kids grow, even our kids who've had ABA, we're going to hit periods of time where their development and their growth is going to meet this skid place where we go, what happened? Did all the work go away? It didn't. It didn't. It means that they're ready to move to the next level. And we are ready to move to the next level. And clearly, Jack Riley is making tremendous progress. But as a parent, sometimes when those things happen, it feels like a setback, like everything is in jeopardy. And I think how important for us to be able to share that with somebody, to see him going through it, so that you guys who are doing this at home and you have that bad day and you're feeling like, oh my gosh, are we going to go back to there? That you remember that this happened with Jack Riley, and you'll see in the coming episodes. And I can tell you from my personal experience, the pizza dough, you push and you push and you push and it shrinks back a little bit, but the next time you push it, it stays out that much further. It's the same thing. And I know it's high irony because I would constantly worry. I'd be on the phone with our supervisor going, Sabrina, we took a step back. Is it going to be forever? We never, because my son had regressed into autism, I was the queen of the panic about, something new popped up that I don't like. And it's going to, because your child develops. It's really a good thing. You breathe, stay in the moment, keep your sense of humor, focus back in on what you need to do and what you need to teach your child, and you'll end up in a better place. Love the A word. If you want to be watching these episodes, you can on YouTube. You can go back to the beginning to see the tremendous progress that Jack Riley has made. Watch that arc. Incredible. And if you want to watch ahead, you can. So it's the YouTube channel for the A word. A really, really wonderful thing. I highly recommend it. We're going to take a break, and then when we come back, we're going to have some of your viewer responses to the question of the day. Stick with us. Back in just a few minutes.
Skills is a revolutionary web-based program that incorporates comprehensive assessment, curriculum design, progress tracking, and treatment evaluation for children with autism all in one place. Developed by the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. Our approach is based on over 40 years of research on the principles of learning and their application to improving the lives of children with autism. How does Skills work? Created with speed and simplicity in mind, Skills was modeled on an easy 3-step process. Step 1. Start assessment. Step 1 begins with our intelligent assessment system, which consists of a series of questions. This assessment is essential to identifying your child's level of skills compared to their typical peers across all areas of development. This includes assessing social, motor, language, adaptive, play, cognition, executive functions, and academic skills. Every skill has an assigned age which indicates when the skill emerges during typical development. This means that each child is automatically presented only with lessons that are relevant to his or her age. Step 2. Choosing activities. It's now easier than ever to build an individualized treatment plan. In Step 2, you are presented with an individualized pool of activities that are directly linked to your student's assessment results. Each activity represents a specific skill that has been indicated by the assessment as needing to be taught. Activities are categorized by curriculum and then by lesson. There are 3 main types of skills: building blocks, fundamental, and expansion skills. Fundamental skills are necessary for successful everyday functioning. Building blocks are prerequisites to a fundamental skill. Expansion skills are non-essential skills, but may provide further enrichment in certain areas. After reviewing the activities available to you, you can quickly add your chosen activities to the treatment plan by simply checking the box and clicking the button. Step 3. Start treatment. Once you have selected and added the activities you want, you are ready to begin teaching. Skills provides you with all the tools necessary to design and manage an effective curriculum plan, such as printable activity guides that are customizable by the teacher, supplemental teaching aids including printable data sheets, teaching guides, visual aids, worksheets, and tracking forms, detailed IEP goals and benchmarks for each activity, brief and visually appealing video tutorials, a variety of treatment progress and clinical timeline charts, and lots more. And since Skills is completely web-based, everything you need is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in one easy-to-access location. Skills users even benefit from unlimited access to a support community, where they can ask questions and share ideas with a skills expert. Skills is always with you.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. And our question of the day today was, what has been your greatest disappointment since your child was diagnosed? It's always interesting to me how you guys, some of you will look at a question in a way that I hadn't really thought of, because I was asking about what's your disappointment with the world, not what's disappointing with your child, because I don't think there's anything disappointing about our children. But some of you were angry because you thought that that's what we were saying. But we'll continue to talk about that. But a lot of people wrote in about a lot of different topics. And somebody wrote in and said, changing diapers. He's almost 5 and shows no interest in going on the potty. You know, and that is a huge frustration. I think that when we can get potty training under control, well, somebody wrote in and said this last week, that independence is the most amazing thing that can happen. We have an adaptive tip later on where we're going to talk specifically about buttoning and unbuttoning. We have a language tip coming up, and I'm going to focus those both on the potty training aspects of them. So stick around for that. Okay, so another person wrote in it and said, nothing at all. My child will never be a disappointment regardless of his diagnosis or because of it. Of course, we agree. Another person said government funding or lack thereof. Yes. Under disappointments, somebody said that even after 23 years, there hasn't been much change in children being diagnosed. It's multiplied so rapidly to the point of scary for me. I think we're all there. Okay, another person who says, how horrible people treat my son. It's like they think because he can't talk, they can treat him however they want. Then when I say something about how what they're doing or did to him hurts him, they get defensive instead of apologizing and stopping the disgusting behavior. I guess in a nutshell, the biggest disappointment has been realizing that most of his family seems to love him less after finding out that he has autism. I am so glad to hear you say that that it seems that they love him less, because I'm hoping that that's all that it is, that they seem that way, that they don't know how to behave. I can't imagine anybody really loving somebody less because they have autism, but I know sometimes people behave that way. And in any case, it still hurts the same. Very disappointing. Another person who writes in and says, government funding. Ha, 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 what government funding? I'm a single mother raising 2 kids, busting my tail feather, and they won't even help me. They just want mothers or fathers to give up. It's so sickening. But I'll have to agree that there's no disappointments regarding his diagnosis. Another person who says, not one thing disappoints me about my grandson, not one, and that's as it should be. Another who says, my children are a blessing, but the many months wait time for diagnosis and treatment appointments that doesn't improve is disappointing. It does take several months, as well as many medical professionals' unwillingness to be a bit more open to ideas regarding treatment or finding causes, hence a cure. Wonderful that you guys have an opportunity to share your frustrations. I think it's really important. Another person who says, don't get me wrong, I love my son the way he is. He is the light of my life, but I wish that he would stop ignoring me. He listens to his teachers and his father, but ignores me, except when he wants something. But yet he loves me the most. I don't get it. That is most disappointing to me, but I adore him. And of course, you know, no way of knowing the individual situation, but I will say this, that sometimes it's true for our children that the safest place is the place that they will push their most challenging behaviors. That certainly was true with my son. He and I were very attached and close, and when he, you know, the whole time growing up, and I was the main caregiver at home, and twice we cycled through extreme challenging behavior where he was lashing out and hitting, and he wasn't hitting anybody but me. And it was so demoralizing because we were on the ABA track, and I was trying really hard to learn all the different techniques and trying to understand and do all the things that were being asked of me. But there was an emotional component to it where I remember sitting in this building upstairs and crying, and then bringing Dr. Jonathan Tarbox in. It was one of the first times that I met him, because I said, somebody's got to do something. I can't do this anymore. He's hitting me, and it's terrible that I'm being hit. I'm not somebody who can be hit. I don't have, and I think it's a good thing that I'm somebody who just can't tolerate that. And but on top of that, there was something about the fact that here's this luscious little boy that I love and that I know loves me, and the fact that he was only hitting me was just emotionally devastating to me. And I kept saying, okay, I know it must be something that I'm doing or not doing that's allowing it, but somebody's got to help me now. And really, put out the call and said, and so here comes Dr. Jonathan Tarbox. And they got us started with SOS, Specialized Outpatient Services, and we got it under control and it stopped. But one of the things that was looked at was that we were just saying that behavior is a way of communicating, and since I was the main communication source and the main source of the good things that would come to him, he was trying to let me know. So not so much that it was my fault, because I think it's so easy for us to go blame, 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 right? But there were some things that I didn't know that I could do so that we could change the behavior. And that when in this particular case, it was very attention driven, that he was looking for attention. So I was given some skills to block the behavior when possible, and that when it would happen, I gave absolutely no attention to it, and literally everything good stopped. And he got that all under control. And there is no hitting, and has not been any hitting for a really long time. But we had to cycle through it twice, and the second time around I was going, oh, seriously? Really? I don't think I can take it. But we had to have consequences be really consistent. So I hope you get some help for that. And I hope that you find a way of, especially if he listens to you when he wants something, I hope you find a way of making it really reinforcing for him not to ignore you. And somebody do an FBA on that. Okay, another person who, in response to the question, what's the most disappointing thing since your child's diagnosis, says the lack of family support. My friends and family that live out of state support my son and our family, that they haven't been. It has ripped our family apart because they get mad instead of understanding my baby. Yeah, I do think it's especially hard for people who are not there and not seeing what's happening and don't understand how much your life has changed and have an expectation that you're going to continue to behave in a way that you used to behave. And you just want to put up a big billboard saying you're not getting it. But with time, hopefully they will. Another person says, I agree my grandsons affected by autism are not a disappointment to me in any way, but the lack of acceptance of autism by family and even close friends is a total disappointment. Yes. Another person who says, after the diagnosis, we were left out to dry to find our own way, and it's not easy. That's really why we're here, because we don't want anybody to be left out to dry or to have to find everything for themselves. We want to be a way for you to find the information that you need. So tell us what you need. Another person who says, mine isn't as much my daughter. I have two that are on the spectrum, but probably the lack of support. She is high functioning for the basics, but all the therapists have shifted us around. They don't know what to do for her temper or hoarding and stealing food. At 13, she has a low IQ and acts more like a 5-year-old. More worried about finding somewhere for her to go this summer while I work. And she says where she lives, which I'm not going to disclose. There aren't any programs for older kids. I'm a single parent of 3, so I'm frustrated in the lack of support both professionally and family. No one understands, and it's so easy to blame me. I think so eloquently put, right? That nobody understands, you need some help, and that people want to shift the blame to you, which frequently we will see. And this is a problem. I was just talking with somebody, a newspaper reporter the other day, about the fact that we saw in the new stats that came out that it's 1 in 54 boys. And I said, you know, this is so bad on so many different levels, because first of all, 1 in 54 boys is just shocking, and it's terrible, and it's absolutely horrifying at how many children that is. But then on the other side of it, the fact that the disparity between the girls and the boys gets even wider, and what happens is that there's fewer and fewer services for the girls that are on the spectrum. And I can't even imagine for you guys who have girls on the spectrum, and especially the teenagers. I hope that you'll look, though. There's a bunch of different programs that are springing up, and there's one in particular that we've heard about here called Girl Power. And it's specifically for teenage girls who are on the Asperger's or somewhere on the autism spectrum. And it's kind of a thing where it looks to me, and I don't know enough about it, but please look into it for yourself. It looks as though it's something that can be replicated in different cities, because they're springing up all over the country. So take a look at that and see, because maybe it's just a question of getting together a couple of other parents and creating a program where you live. Because I'm just going to guess that you're not completely alone. I know that there's nowhere near as many girls on the spectrum, but still they are there. And I hope that finding the summer program is the thing that comes to you sooner, and we'll check into, since we know where you live, and see what we can find out. Okay, another person says, no disappointments, nothing but support and open, loving arms from family and friends, and great teachers too. I love to hear that, because that means there's hope for the rest of us. Another person who says, absolutely nothing, he's been a joy and I'm so proud of him. Fabulous. Another person who says, coming to terms that he is our only living son, and the severity of his autism will mean we have to outlive him in order to protect him, and he will never be able to be a father because he can't take care of himself. Our family line will die when he dies. He's 16 right now. Our retirement money is gone. I can barely work, and we're now trying to get by on one income with a huge amount of debt. We finally have help from the state after being on the waiting list for 10 years, but the agency can't seem to find anyone to help with supported home living skills. I got to tell you, and there's so many of you who are out there, and you know, I hear that, and I hear 10-year waiting list, and I don't know how you guys have gotten through it. I just don't. But you have. And what I want to tell you is that things are not the same as they used to be. I hope that you're checking into what insurance coverage you have. I hope that you're looking at skills, because I know it wasn't there 10 years ago, but it's here now. And you can be working, you can be training yourself and working with your child at home. I definitely hear you about the money, but there's grant money available. I believe that they're still taking grants right now. They're in a grant phase with Act Today. I hope you're applying for grants, whether it's just to get assessed or to start something or get a grant for skills, whatever it is that you feel like you need the most. Maybe this young adult needs some sort of technology, some sort of a pad system that they can be working on stuff. But it's wonderful that you're writing in and saying this, because when you do, it starts a process of opening up to more things coming. It's so hard with the teenagers, but more services are coming, because there's so many kids that are about to age into that. So more services are on their way. Another person says, well, my disappointment would also be friends and family. Since my son was diagnosed at 15 months of age, no one bothers with him or asks about him. He is 14 now, and I'm a single parent of 3 children. He's my oldest, and I feel that my family and friends can do a lot more with acknowledging him. He's a beautiful boy to be around, and I don't get how people can shut out others who have autism. They are special individuals. Absolutely. And you know, I think that it's important, one little step at a time, one person at a time. I would ask you to consider, is there somebody in your family that you feel is a pivotal person in the family who communicates well with everybody, who is usually well-intentioned, who's just missing the boat here, that you could go to and say, you know what would, instead of saying, you know, all these years you've ignored my child, on the other side of it saying, you know what would mean ever so much to me is if you would be willing to make an effort to get to know my child. But you got to pick the right person. And you might be surprised. There's so much ignorance. And as much as you're going through what you're going through with your child, the rest of the family is also going through something that you may not know. We're going to be talking about funding a little bit later, and we're going to talk about fundraisers. And one of the things that I always share is that when my son was diagnosed and we told everybody, at least I thought we did, we told everybody that we thought was a major player in our life, and some of the information disseminated a little bit further out to other people. But about a year in, we decided to have a fundraiser. And I felt a little funny about it because I felt like we should be able to handle this on our own, but we couldn't. And so I got over that pride and said, we're going to have a fundraiser. And I sent out a thing to everybody and said, here's the deal. We're doing this fundraiser. And if there's any way you can help out, it would be so appreciated. And you know what I got back? I got back a bunch of phone calls and emails from people, see, I'm going to get choked up, who said, thank you for asking for our help, because we have been sitting here for a year and didn't know what to do. And we didn't know what to say, and we didn't want to be offensive. And so we've been sitting here, and it feels so good to know this is something that I could do. And they showed up in so many different ways. I mean, there were some people who could not come to the event but donated something to be auctioned. And then there are other people who didn't have anything to be donated to auction, but so they performed at our event. And other people who said, can I just like work the door? You know, and people, but without a doubt, without a single exception, people were overjoyed to come. Okay, I can think of one exception. But, you know, there's always going to be one in the crowd, right? And then you just go, thank you, please stand over there, a little further away. People reveal themselves sometimes, and sometimes it's a good thing, and sometimes it's not. Okay, so maybe there's somebody in the family that you could reach out to and say, it would be nice if people made an effort. I would feel differently if people made an effort. You never know. Okay, another person who said, not knowing what is going through my son's mind. I'm constantly playing mind reader, but I'm sure I'm wrong half the time. It's hard when he's trying to vocalize and point at something and saying the same sound over and over. I don't get it. The other day he did this and I got his speech device and he was saying pickle. He was comparing Larry the cucumber from VeggieTales to a pickle he was eating. He has to be so frustrated on a daily basis. It breaks my heart. But you know what? I hear in there, I hear that you are using a device and that it sounds like, you know, you could use an upgrade to a device that's even easier to use, because for somebody to be able to compare Larry the pickle from VeggieTales to the pickle that they're eating, there's so much going on there to get excited about. I can completely understand your frustration and his frustration. And if you need a grant to be able to get a better speech device that isn't left someplace else, that they've always got with them, that's really lightweight, I hope you put in a grant application to ACT today. That's exactly the kind of grant that they give out all the time. Yep, there's a waiting list, but you know, the fact that he can communicate that on the device, it just says that there's so much there that's capable of and that can be gotten to. And let's work towards that. Absolutely exciting news. Okay, we got to take a break, but when we come back, we're going to do a teaching language tip. And because of the toilet training question issue, I'm going to gear it towards that. So come back in a second. We're going to talk about one of the first phases of toilet training. Stick with us.
I'm Adele Nadowski, Director and Co-Creator of Skills.
CARD e-learning is an online tool that has been developed by the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. CARD e-learning is the training that is delivered to the ABA therapists at CARD to train them on the principles of applied behavior analysis and to equip them with the knowledge they need to essentially deliver the ABA-based techniques during their therapy with the children that they work with. ABA has been proven scientifically to be the most effective intervention for children with autism. At this point, even the Surgeon General has come out with a statement suggesting just that. So we know that this is something that children with autism definitely need if they're going to improve and live the lives that we're hoping that they're going to be able to live. By being able to train people on this one particular method that we know works, and to be able to have all of your staff within your school settings on the same page, it allows you to take more of a multidisciplinary approach, and there's definite consistency going on within the team. It makes sure that every person involved with that child's treatment program, including the speech and language pathologist, the occupational therapist, the teachers, the aides, all of these individuals to be able to be trained so that they can all work together effectively with the child. Parents that are using CARD e-learning can use it either to train themselves, and then after having done that they can implement different techniques with their child in order to teach new skills. But oftentimes parents might also be working either with an ABA provider, with a school, or they may have even hired their own therapist to deliver the intervention techniques. So CARD e-learning can be used either to collaborate with your school. It can also be used to train the therapists that are coming to the home of the parents, or it can also be shared with the ABA provider so that that provider can find out about it and perhaps implement it within their organization and train their staff. You can also do reporting for your organization. So you can actually look and find out which teachers are progressing, what their quiz scores are, and actually we can give you reports as well that will help you to compare the different teachers and their performances. CARD e-learning is really simple to use. You can log on to this as long as you have a computer, that's all you need, and an internet connection. And you can work on it any time of the day, anywhere that you're at. When you log on, you realize that right away. First of all, on the top of the page, there's a navigational tutorial. It's a how to use this page button. Simply by watching that video, it'll all kind of unfold in front of you, and it becomes extremely self-explanatory. CARD e-learning has 9 modules, and you can basically go through those at your own pace. You're going to be watching videos that are kind of like a storyboard with narration, but in addition to that, there's many different video clips of therapists actually implementing the techniques that are being described within the storyboard that you can also watch. And then of course you're able to pause, you're able to type notes right directly underneath the video that you're watching. You can save your notes, you can review them, and between each module you do take a quiz, and once you pass that quiz you can go on to the next module. And then after you complete all of them, you have a final exam. And by completing the final exam and passing with a score of 85% or better, you will be given a certificate of completion. Let me show you how easy it is to use CARD e-learning.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. And so thrilled to be here. One of the things that we have a question of the day. We asked you guys, the question of the day was, what's been the biggest disappointment since you got a diagnosis? And I meant in general, because I don't think there's anything disappointing about our kids, right? But you guys wrote in a bunch of different things, and one of the first ones was one that really tugs at me because I think it's surmountable. So I want to talk a little bit. We've been talking about challenging behavior. That's our topic for the day. And I think that that's a huge, big heading. There's so many things that can be under the heading of challenging behavior. And I do think that a lack of toilet training at a certain age certainly goes into that heading. That's challenging behavior, and there are lots of other challenging behaviors that go around the toileting. And somebody had written in and said, you know, my child is 5 and shows no signs of being interested in potty training. And so I said, you know, we're going to have a language tip, we're going to have an adaptive tip, and I'm going to put them through the filter of working on toileting. So if you've got a 5-year-old or a 15-year-old or a 3-year-old or somebody that you're saying, I really would like for this person to be potty trained, but they're not showing any signs or interest, I want you to know that it's great when they show signs and interest of potty training. And, you know, what a wonderful, wonderful thing, because then we've got a little bit of motivation, right? But the fact that somebody isn't showing signs of wanting to be toilet trained does not mean it's not going to happen, and it doesn't mean that you can't start to work on it. What we do want to do is wait until the child's physiological stuff is at a point where it can be. Now, that might be different ages for different kids. I have known, especially little girls, who for whatever reason have that on the ball and can have that happen at 2 years old, although that's really rare. And, you know, there are other kids who, you know, all of the inner contraptions that are involved, they're not mature enough to be able to do something like that until 5 or 6 years of age, okay? So you may want to go to the pediatrician and just make sure that the mechanics of things are working in such a way that the child, you know, I can think of one person in particular who took her daughter and found out that the floor of her bladder had not developed quite right, and that it was moving a little bit slower. So the expectation that potty training was going to happen and be done at the age of 5 had been not a realistic expectation to be met. So with that knowledge, then they were able to work on things in a different way. So if you're having issues and your child is a little bit older, it might be worth it to go to the pediatrician and just get things checked out to make sure that there's no other impediment, right? But otherwise, if you've got a child who is 5 and they seem to be developing fine, you can start to create interest around using the potty. And one of the very basic lessons that isn't necessary for all children, but is a really good one, especially for kids who have shown no interest whatsoever, is to take and work on the word or gesture or sign or picture for potty before you ever do anything else. So no clothes are coming off, you're not even working on fastening, unfastening yet, but we're just going to take regular trips into the bathroom after we say potty. And we're going to make this as reinforcing as possible. So in the beginning, depending on the abilities of the child, you might just, you know, one of the things that we did and that I liked, although you don't have to do this, is that we got a timer that my child liked and thought was really reinforcing, and so we would put the timer on and we put it on like 10 minutes, and which is not just an arbitrary number. They had done a little bit of research about how often after my child had had a whole bunch to drink, how long it was before he would wet the diaper. I kept data on it, and they were able to take that and figure out that for my son, 10 minutes ended up being about where we started. But you're going to play with that and see what the right amount is. But anyway, we put it on 10 minutes, and we weren't even concerned about the diaper at this point. He's still wearing the diaper, and we're not talking about doing anything else. We're not taking the diaper off, nothing, right? But the timer, we would, you know, my son would see the timer, and we would be, you know, making the faces and putting it on 10 and sitting it on the table, and then we would play something, you know, that was really, really fun and exciting. And so then, you know, 10 minutes, and then the timer goes ding, and as soon as it would go ding, we'd go, oh, you know, big excitement, and go potty. And we, you know, we thought of it like party, right? But it's potty. And then everybody who was there in the home at that time, we would all run to the bathroom and make it as exciting as, and he was like, what are we doing? We're playing a game. It's so exciting. We'd run into the bathroom and we'd go, we're in the potty, yay. And we brought some things into the potty. So we had a potty chair there, and we had a potty book, and we had some potty toys, and we go, we're in the potty, yay. And then we'd leave. And, you know, like I said, nobody sat on the potty to begin with, but we were just saying potty, right? And we really, I'll be honest with you, that we really didn't have to do a whole lot more than that because it was so fun and so exciting. Now, that was something that my son liked. He thought it was really fun. He thought it was hilarious. He thinks that running someplace with a group of people is very reinforcing. There's just something about that that's really great for him, and he loved it as a child, and it seemed like there was some big secret, and he loved to be a part of it and would make incredible eye contact. We would get in the potty, and he's like, what's going on? And we're in the potty. This is yay! And we tickle him, make it really exciting that, you know, and he's with all of us, and we're someplace, we ran someplace, loved it. That may not be the thing for your child. You may have to like do bubbles on the way to the bathroom. But what we're doing is laying the groundwork that this place and going to this place is exciting. Whatever it is, whatever it takes, right? And that when we get there, there's good stuff. There's nothing to be frightened of. It's just happy, happy, happy. It's a party, 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 right? And so we did that for probably a week. And, you know, it got to the point where the bell would ding and I'd go, oh, what is it? And because we had done it so many times, my son started saying pie, right? You know, it was the approximation we were rewarding, going, good talking, that's fabulous, it's the potty, tickling him, and we all run into the bathroom, yay! Fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. So it got to the point where the bell would ding and he would know it's time to say potty. And so we made it even longer. So it'd be go potty. Yay! So what we've done is taught him that we say potty, we go to the potty, and it's very reinforcing. He doesn't even understand what that means at this point. Doesn't matter. It's reinforcing, it's good, it's fabulous, wonderful things happen. So, and he understands it with the timer. So we started fading the timer so that the timer wouldn't necessarily go off. And sometimes I would just look at him and say, go potty, and he would go potty, and we would run and go to the potty. So, you know, we've taught that when the timer goes off, we're going to go to the potty, but we've also left it so that, you know, we don't have to have the timer go off so that he can eventually request it for his own. Fabulous. So that was the way in which we taught potty. And by the way, this lesson is in skills and you can see it. It isn't necessarily for all children because you may already have a child who understands that when we go potty, we go there and there's nothing aversive. But for a child who has no awareness, has no interest, it's a great icebreaker. You go potty. Now, in a few minutes, we're going to do the adaptive tip, and we'll talk about how we can work on fastening and unfastening as a companion piece to toileting to make it more reinforcing. So we're going to take a little break, and we'll come back in just a few minutes. Stick with us. I'm here today with Sarah Cho, who is the Managing Supervisor of CARD Fresno. And she's a wonderful resource, and today we're going to be talking with her about using assisted technology.
If you are a parent of a child who is primarily non-vocal and maybe has been using a type of iconic communication system, and you are recognizing that your child has really just outgrown it. You know, it is something, they need something faster, they need something better. There's so much more that we can do in the world of augmentative devices. I am a huge fan of using augmentative device programs on cell phones and also on iPads. As you and I were chatting, we had just downloaded a really simple tap-to-talk program. So for this one, all a child would need to be able to do is just tap on what they wanted.
I want a drink.
And then that immediately pulls up a screen where there's water, juice, milk, soda, and smoothie. So maybe the child just wanted a drink of their water.
Water, please.
And it's that simple. And there's not a lot to manipulate. The child does not have to have really advanced motor skills at all.
We're seeing more and more organizations advocating getting an iPad because of all those features. But it's not just for kids who are non-vocal.
We have a lot of kids, you know, who have significant impairment in their sensory regulation, they really are seeking visual input, auditory input, tactile input, and if they're learning to appropriately play with a cell phone or with an iPad or with a computer, it provides those levels of appropriate sensory stimulation. So you're getting appropriate sensory, hopefully leading to a decrease in some of those repetitive behaviors, and you're teaching age-appropriate play skills. You know, they have free apps even if you're working on verb use, and the child can actually scroll through the different pictures and practice talking and narrating what they see in the pictures. There's just a lot of wonderful things that you can get from devices nowadays.
Yeah.
You know, whether we're looking at language, social, play.
For my son, it's quite the social thing. When he sees somebody else who has one, he gravitates to them and they start playing together. It really starts the conversation with the other child.
What games do you have? What apps do you have? Can I play that one? Can I see it?
Yeah. And a lot of the apps are super inexpensive or free.
Or free.
Which is, you can't be free. Free is good.
You know, so I mean, you might have that initial investment in actually purchasing an appropriate device, but then a lot of the software or things that you need, you know, are free or relatively inexpensive. There are also some really nice applications that might be a little bit more expensive, maybe like $20 or $30, or you can essentially download the entire, for example, PEC's icon library for just that little initial, you know, investment.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod, and we're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. I'm so glad that Emily played that clip because, you know, don't let me get away with things, you guys. A lot of times I'll start out and say, you know, we can teach this vocally, and we can teach this with sign, and we can teach it with gesture, and we can teach it with a picture iconic communication system. And then frequently I will forget to explain the different ways in which we can go about doing that. We were just talking about making the word potty be exciting and pairing it with going to that place before we even start working on potty training. And I talked about doing it vocally, how we would model it and do it. But if you have a child that you're not working on things vocally as quickly because you know that you want to get the functional communication skills first, we can be making the sign for it as while we're saying it and helping the child to make the sign. We can have the little, we can make a little icon that the child can point to, and while we're saying potty, you know, any of those things, or just having the child point when the bell goes off, point to the other room that we want to go potty. But the main thing is that we want to teach the child that this is the term for going there, so that they're going to be able to demand to go to the potty. They're going to be able to request in whatever functional communication skill, whether it's on their device, but that they know this is the thing when I want to go to that room, this is the thing that I need to do or say in order to get that. Okay, so I promised we would come back and talk about it from another perspective too, because toileting, it's just, when you get that under control, life is, I don't know, it's rosier. First of all, the expense that you save on the diapers, but there's something about, and I think it's equal for the child and for the parent, of making that kind of progress that gives you so much hope, gives you so much freedom, opens you up in so many different ways, independence, right? It's just a great thing. So we'll see that toileting is in the adaptive skills curriculum of skills, and you guys know I use skills and I think that it's wonderful. And we were talking about, again, making the language of potty so that the child can request it. But at a certain point, we are going to start to encourage a child to sit on the potty, and there are things that we can do to help the child to be able to do that, setting them up for success, like giving, we're going to start to work on being able to void into the toilet before we work on the whole poop aspect. I'm just going to get, let's not be as mamby-pamby with the words, right? So the poop thing, usually, not always, but usually that's going to be the harder one, so we'll work on that second. Let's see if we can get the pee and the potty and get that being rewarded, because that's going to make it easier for us to get the poop in the potty. And alongside of all that, and again, we want to make it as reinforcing as possible so that when a child does pee in the potty, I don't know what your child finds reinforcing, but it's got to come out in big fiesta, right? That's where you don't want to be, you know, underselling it. It's got to be a party when they pee in the potty, and everybody has to participate in it. And if you're squeamish about that, you know what? Get over it. Get a sense of humor. I know it's weird because sometimes you go, oh, really? Really? I have to get that excited? And I've told the story before about my husband, and it got to the point where we were so busy reinforcing that kind of thing that at one point during a clinic, my husband went into the bathroom to use the facilities, and it's a very echoey bathroom that you can hear in the other room. And we were so used to modeling it ourselves so that if we went to the bathroom, we would go, yay, I'm going potty in the toilet. And so we could hear my husband, he's by himself in the bathroom, and we could hear him going, yay, I'm going potty. Everybody thought he'd lost his mind. Hey, I would much rather be that and have a child who's peeing in the potty and happy than a child who's crying and we're still buying diapers, right? Let's be as happy as we can and have senses of humor about this. So we go over the top and we celebrate too much. It's so much better than being underselling it and being right? I think so anyway. Okay, so one of the things that comes along in adaptive skills that's going to go hand in hand with potty training is being able to fasten and unfasten. And, you know, for a long time, my son's finger skills were not as, they weren't where we wanted them to be in terms of toileting, so it was kind of slowing him up. So I just literally went and bought all shorts and pants that had elastic waist so that we could just get the potty thing under control and worrying about the fastening. So we were just worrying about pulling pants down and pulling pants up, and we were helping him to do that in the beginning. But eventually you get to the point where you got to work on the buttons and the zippers. And one of the things that you know, I always talk about the duh moments, but it's so much harder. This is a duh moment. It's so much harder to fasten a zipper when you're having to look at it from this angle, or fasten a button when you're having to look at it from this angle, than if you're looking at it from this angle, right? It just goes without saying. So we're going to do a little bit of a task analysis, although Skills does that all for you. But what are the steps that are involved in being able to fasten a button? And it's a lot. There's a lot that's involved in that. You know, it's having these two things, having to be able to hold both of them, to be able to stick the button in one side of the buttonhole and be holding it taut, and then pull the button through the other part, right? It's a lot of different steps for fingers, and to be able to hold on to things and grasping things. And if one element gets out of your control, then you're not getting the button done. And imagine trying to learn how to do that by looking down. Well, there's some great dolls that are out there that will come with clothes that, you know, there's a button and a zipper and a tie and a Velcro clasp, right? You can go and get those, and that's fine. If your child is older and you really don't, like, sometimes they have a cute little puppy that's got a vest on. You know, I think sometimes for girls, it can be that it's this really reinforcing thing that they get a doll and they're dressing the doll, and so they're getting those skills. And for the boys, sometimes they're not as reinforced by those things. Honestly, sometimes the girls aren't either. One of the things we had somebody who gave us a gift certificate to Build-A-Bear, and so that was a really reinforcing thing for my son, that he had Build-A-Bear and he had an outfit that he wanted to dress the Build-A-Bear, and so he would work really hard to overcome his finger skills to do that on the bear. And eventually what we did was that my mom made a vest for his bear that had a big old button. I'm talking, it was this big honkin' button, right, with a big old buttonhole, and so that we started with that big of a button, that for him to be able to put the button through one side of it and then reach through and pull it through the other side. And it felt like it was going to take a lifetime, and I kept thinking, how are we going to go from this big old honkin' button on the teddy bear to him being able to do a button on himself? And it happens. It happens if you move slowly and you reinforce. Same thing with the zippers. You know, to be able to see what the mechanics of a zipper are and to practice and get the finger skills looking at it this way before you have to look down and get the other perspective. Really, really helpful and useful. I think one of the hardest things to be able to do is do the button on jeans. Oh my goodness. Like, why don't they just make it difficult? And it's difficult for everybody. It's not just kids who are on the spectrum, it's difficult for everybody. They tell me in school that up through essentially 4th grade, you know, the kids are coming back from the bathroom with the zip pulled up, but the button not, because they can't do it. And these are completely neurotypical kids. So go figure. But we can work on these things in this way. But if your child, if you're purely just going for toilet training, that is something that can come later. Don't feel like you have to get the buttoning and the fastening, but it is something you can be working, you know, either later or at the same time, unrelated to. But let's not overload a child and say, okay, we're going to go in the bathroom and now you're going to work on your zip skills, right? Do it for them. Make it a party when they go in the bathroom. If you've done the precursor where you've done the timer and every 10 minutes you went in and went party, all you need to do is start adding one element at a time. So it may be that you get in to the bathroom, and if you've been taking everybody, I would pare it down to just, you know, 2 people that get to be the special people, you know, whether it's mom or dad that goes into the bathroom with a child, and that you make it a really fun, pleasurable, you know, so make it fun. We're going to, you know, take the pants down and we're going to sit on the potty. It's so exciting. And they have so many different kinds of potties now. Potties that sit on top of the big potty, or potties that sit next to them. My son had one that played music when you went to the bathroom. You know, there's everything under the sun. For boys, if you're teaching them to stand up, there are targets that you can put in. I know people who will put the little round cereal in there, and that's, you know, it's target practice. Make it reinforcing. And we don't want to comment when something doesn't happen. So if you're going in and you're very early working on skills, and even for the boys, you can have them sit down to get the idea of peeing in the potty. You can work on the standing up later on. But they sit down in the potty, and we had a special potty book that we would go in and we would read the book. And it took us about 5 minutes to read the book, which was the perfect amount of time. So the timer would be set for 10 minutes, and we would go potty, right? And go into the bathroom. He would sit down, we'd get out the potty book, and we would read the potty book, and it was all about how wonderful, I know what a potty is for, and how great it is that, you know, when you have a potty, and pointing out all the different things. So we're interacting. He's having this wonderful moment with whoever he's sitting with, and sometimes he would pee and sometimes he wouldn't. And if he would pee, it was a whole, like I said, whole big party, pull out all the stops. It's so exciting. It's so wonderful. And we'd come out of the bathroom, and everybody, you know, we'd do the washing the hands, and we'd come out of the bathroom, and everybody would like, congratulations, and he would get access to something that he really wanted. If he didn't pee in the potty, it was a non-reaction. It was like, okay, the book is done, let's go. And we'd pull up the pants, we'd still wash the hands, and we'd come out, and there'd be no party. It wouldn't be a, you know, well, you were supposed to pee in the potty. We didn't have any discussion that, we just were done, and we would reset the timer for like 7 minutes. And 7 minutes later, ding, potty, and we'd go back in, and usually if we didn't get it the first time, we would get it the second time. It took maybe 2-3 days by the time we got to that point, and he had it, because he felt better when he would pee in the potty, and there was a party, and he wanted the party. You know, the poo thing, an entirely different subject that we'll save for another day. But I just want to bring home the message that even if you have a child who does not express interest in the potty, you can make it interesting. You can build that interest. And I love to hear from the therapists who work here that say, you know, it doesn't matter whatever age they've gone in, and that every single child that they've been able to work with, they've gotten potty trained. Isn't that exciting to hear? I know there are going to be some of you who are going to say, but, you know, we've tried everything. I just want to ask you then, if you've tried everything, it's time to bring somebody else in. Bring an expert in. Bring a BCBA who knows about toileting, and don't give up. There's no give up. And you will feel so much better when you get this under control, but don't let it get to the point where it's adversarial. If, you know, going into the potty is traumatic, get help. If you're at a point where you're so frustrated that you're in tears over it and you can't even bear to go back, get help. You deserve it. Your child deserves it. You can do this. We can have our children be potty trained, and that is a party. It is. All right, we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back in just a few minutes with a natural environment training tip. Stick with us.
Hi, I'm Thea Davis. I'm a board-certified behavioral analyst. I am the clinical director of an organization that provides intensive ABA services to children with autism. Recently, we've been using the skills curriculum, which was produced by the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. Skills curriculum is an online tool for providers or people working with children with autism, and it helps develop programming. There's many features that I like about this online tool. The first one is the breadth and depth of the curriculum. It covers many domains, any domain that you need to teach a child with autism. I also like the fact that as it's helping develop programming, it gives you sample IEP goals. It also gives you data sheets that you could utilize to target different skill areas. The last piece of the curriculum that I think is essential, that I have not found on any of the other curriculums, is the ability to individualize it to the child that you're working with. So you can go in and change it to your own programming, take pieces that you like, tweak it to whatever that child's needs are. The fourth part of the curriculum is a tool called e-learning, and we have begun using that for our direct care staff. It's an online series of modules which teaches the background and philosophy of applied behavioral analysis, and we've actually now added that to our training protocol. All of our therapists go through the CARD e-learning prior to even getting their instruction from the supervisors, which helps us have a more effective training and efficient training program. The part that I like the most about the skills as a clinical director is that it offers support to my supervisors. Not only does it help them develop programming, but it helps them be extremely productive with their time. I recommend this online tool for any provider, parent, or school that works with children with autism.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod, and I promised you that we were going to talk about NET, Natural Environment Training. So much of what we talk about here is ABA, and I just want to take a second to remind everybody that ABA stands for Applied Behavior Analysis, and ABA is a wonderful, wonderful tool that uses a lot of different kinds of ways of teaching in order to be able to effectively target skill areas that we want our children to grow in. And there's an interesting progression that when we start to work on something, and of course we're going to work on things in myriads of different ways, but we use something called DTT, discrete trial teaching. A lot of times it's really effective to start teaching a new skill in that way because it really targets and makes things very simple so that a child can understand them and begin to acquire a skill, right? But if we only ever did DTT, we would not end up with the results that we want to see, right? Because it's a very set, strict environment in which the variables are under control, and it doesn't teach the skill in a way that it helps the child to begin to acquire an understanding and begin to be able to do a skill, but for it to look and function normally in the real world, it needs lots of opportunity to do it in the real world. And that's when we get into natural environment training. So we want both of these things as a part of our ABA program. And I think too often people try to dismiss and say it's one thing or the other. Well, a quality ABA program is going to include elements of both of them. All right, so what is NET? NET, Natural Environment Training, is very child-driven. So we're going to let the child choose what they want to do. And within the thing that they're doing, we're going to hope that we can create within that structure things that are reinforcing for the child that also give them an opportunity to try out those skills that they've been learning in other ways. So for instance, that I'm trying to think of a real life example that doesn't have to do with children on the spectrum, that when we play with the children, let's say functional pretend play, right? Whether they're on the spectrum or they're not on the spectrum, we'll play restaurant sometimes, or even play house, right? And so at some point somebody is sitting there and they're sitting at a table, whether it's a pretend play table or a real table, like it could be an imaginary table, right? I'm sitting here at the table and I might, because the child has said, I want to play house and I'm going to cook you breakfast. It was their preference that they said that they want to do that. Okay, so now within that confine, and I'm playing with the child and doing things that they want to do, I might decide that, you know, I'm going to have my pretend napkin and I'm going to put it on my lap and I'm going to ask for something to drink. And I'm going to say, you know, I want the blue liquid. I want the blue soda. And if I, you know, I can be smart about this and set some things up so that I've got some different things to work with, or I can just do it on the fly. You don't necessarily have to be, if I look over and I see that there's a blue cup and there's a green cup, and I might say, well, you know, I want it in the blue cup. Right? And so now the child is having to, they ask to play this, but they're going over and they're trying to figure out which one is the blue one and which one is the green one. And they, you know, let's say that they get the green one and I go, no, I want the blue one, and I'm pointing to it, right? It's just another way that I'm working on blue. Their receptive understanding of the word blue. Well, when you start to think about all the different things that you can do while you're doing natural environment training, it's mind-blowing. Right? That there's everything under the sun. But I think one of the most important elements of it is that you're letting the child dictate what the activity is that they want to do. So let's say that I'm working with an older child and I'm thinking of my son right now and thinking, you know, we're working on some of the problem solving skills and skills in the executive functions curriculum. So if I said to my son, okay, I'm going to play with you right now, what do you want to play? He's probably going to tell me video games. Okay, all right, let's play video games. Which video game do you want to play? So now we sit down to play it and I create some sort of problem, whether it's I create the problem in the video game or I create the problem where I'm sitting or I'm not paying attention, and he has to identify the problem, and I'm not saying anything to him, but you know, for his well-being, in order for things to continue, he's got to identify what the problem is and come up with a solution and see if the solution is working. And I can always talk to him about it later on, and I can prompt him as we go through it, right? But we're doing it in such a way that, and I'm not trying to make, you know, I want to make sure that it's pleasurable that we're working on this, so I don't want to prolong it and, you know, I don't want to lay down and refuse to play. That's not going to be fun. But I may create a problem where I'm saying, I don't know which button to push. And this is something that happens in our house a lot. And my son will say, you know, push the, you know, and I say, I don't know which one that is. So now he has to stop and identify the problem. Mom doesn't have the prior knowledge. He has to figure out whether he's going to describe it to me or come over, and one of his favorite things is he wants to take it out of my hands and push the buttons. And I always say to him, use your words. Teach me what to do, and he's got to figure out the right way to teach me. Natural environment training, and I can be working on all kinds of language things once I say, you know, use your words, that I can say, you know, he can say something and I can say, I don't understand that. Can you tell me in a different way? Right? So many different things. And whenever we've taught something with DTT, we want to make sure that we have a natural environment training component to it. So when you, and with kids who are younger, and kids who don't have functional communication skills, you might think, well, I don't even know how to ask them what they want to play. Well, really all that is a preference assessment. We've talked about before that even with a baby, you can set 3 objects in front of them and see which one they gravitate towards, which one they'll reach their hand out towards. And if you say, well, my child isn't doing any of those things, then it's time to scale back another foot and go, okay, maybe I don't have the right toys. I've shared before that that one of the things that I always used to do is put my son in the cart of the shopping cart and go to the biggest toy store I could find and just walk up and down the aisles and see what grabs his attention. If he looked at something for a long period of time, I would take that thing off the shelf and put it on his lap. I'm teaching him that looking at something and attending to it means that you get access to it, right? So that was a great natural environment training right there. And then I would watch him play with it and see, and I would keep going up and down the aisles and see, well, you know, he likes this toy, but when this toy came along, he reached his arm out for it. Okay, well, I want to put that one in the cart and see what he's going to do with it. And in this way, we can figure out what our kids' preferences are. And we can work, you know, you don't even have to ask a child. If you've got a child in a toy room and you set the child down, what do they go and do? Now, there are some kids who will run and find one toy, and that's the thing that they're going to play with, and you can stay for 2 hours and they're going to play with only that toy. So there's not a whole lot of interest in the other toys, but they're going to fixate on that one toy. Well, that's useful information because what we're going to start to do is pair toys with that toy. So if they run and they get the Buzz Lightyear toy and that's all they're going to play with, great. You go and you get the dinosaur, and the dinosaur comes over and attacks Buzz Lightyear. Now they're playing with the toy that they want to play with, and you know, the child might start to tantrum because you're interrupting the play. I wouldn't attend to that too much, and I wouldn't give up. You don't want to torture them, but you really want to. And I see therapists all the time, you know, the child's playing with the train, and that's great, but the therapist will come along with something else and they run into the train. And you think, well, that's kind of rude and that's kind of mean. That's how children play. That's exactly how children play. And then the child has to deal with it. And what's going to happen is the child's all happy and dealing with their trains and playing whatever, and along comes the dinosaur who wrecks the train, and the child is going to, in some way, focus their attention on what the thing was, the therapist or the parent so there may be some eye contact that happens, and as soon as there's eye contact that happens, you know, you stop wrecking the train, right? So we're teaching eye contact in that natural environment, that you get rewarded. The thing that you don't like stops when you make the eye contact. So many different ways. So many different ways. It really is endless. But remember that the best way, the focus really needs to be on that you're doing an activity that the child wants to do. We just watched the A Word, and she was working on social ID questions, excuse me, but also identifying the people in his life, and he's bouncing on the bed. He's the happiest of little boys. What a great time and a place to work on something, and then they're going, yay, and he thinks it's great fun. Well, meanwhile, back at the ranch, he's learning some really great skills. Okay, stick with us. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the other side of things, discrete trial teaching, and how we can be more effective doing that. Back in a minute.
When Maddie was diagnosed, I'll be honest, I was very ignorant on what autism was. I knew that autism was basically something that hit boys at the age of 2 to 3. They shut down, and sometimes you think of the typical Rain Man movie. And with Maddie, she was doing all the same signs and symptoms of a typical child with autism spectrum disorder.
Stand up.
She didn't even acknowledge us coming into the room. She had barely any eye contact. She didn't interact with her sisters. She didn't really do anything. She just basically lined up her toys, and that was about it. We have a team of 7 volunteers, or 8 now. We have 8 volunteers, including my husband and I. And I'm the team leader, and so I do all the curriculum and get everything ready each week.
Jana was downstairs until 11 o'clock at night working on curriculum, going through 2 different textbooks. And then we, as a group, meet on Monday nights, and we would go through what the curriculum was from Jana. And a lot of times we would go, well, how exactly do you do that? How do you sit her at the table and do this trial base? Well, what Skills has done for us, it's taken that away from Jana trying to figure out the curriculum for one. She can go down, or on even our laptop, And she can sit down and through all these questions, it comes up with the different programs.
At least for me, it was a relief off my shoulders. I was worried that I might be missing something, missing a curriculum that maybe she needs to know, where skills, they have every possible thing your child needs to know from 0 to 7. They have a program for that.
What noise is this?
Good job! Every program that we did with her, I knew it was specific for what she needed to learn. Because before skills, it was a lot of, okay, well, is that really age appropriate for a 2-year-old? You know, because it's not generalized. It's anywhere from 0 to 7. This is what your child needs to know in most manuals you'll find. But for this, okay, yep, she should be learning this. And no, she's not 4 yet. She doesn't need to know that yet.
We are so fortunate that Jana was able to attend a conference put on by CARD that opened the door for skills, and that there's no looking back for us.
We started using the program in November. It seemed like by January something just clicked, and she has completely kind of came out of her fog that she was in for quite a while.
I have never read a documented case on any child that has not benefited anything from applied behavior analysis, and now with this new skills and being, you know, like the E version of ABA, I can't imagine it doing anything harmful to their child. It's nothing but exponential growth for us.
To see her now, it just blows us away. I mean, we call her our little miracle child because in 7 months' time, she's just blossomed into this normal, functioning child, and suddenly, we joke about it all the time, like suddenly we have twins.
If you're even thinking about doing it, do it. Because the absolute worst thing you can do is do nothing at all. And even if you use this program and it's just a single mom or a single dad working in the evenings with their child, this program is going to benefit them. It's going to show you where they are, it's going to show you where they need to go, and it's going to show you what skills and how to get there. It is an online book on how to help recover your child.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I love to see Maddie's story, and I love for all of you guys to know what's possible. And, you know, what's so inspirational to me is parents who say, I'm just going to get a can-do attitude and I'm going to figure it out. And there's something about that. And I remember when I didn't have that attitude, and I remember when it's shifted, and it was because I saw other parents who were doing it. And I went, okay, wait a minute, I'm sitting here and I'm feeling all very sad and sorry for my whole family. But here are these people who had the same opportunity to sit and feel sad and sorry for themselves, and they're not. They're in motion, they're getting something done. And it really inspired me and kicked my game up. And instead of asking myself, you know, well, what can't I do, saying, what can I do today? That's the whole thing we've been talking about today. And I look at this family, and that mom, oh my goodness, you know, she was going to do it on her own with nobody. It didn't matter how many hours it took. She was going to do it on her own. And then she discovered skills and said, I don't have to do this completely on my own. But that whole team of people that they had working with Maddie, all volunteers. They did not pay anything out of pocket to have those people help. And I have to say, you know, we've talked about it before on the show about the fact that there are so many organizations who love to donate time and love to be of service and do community service. And we were at the Autism Walk, the LA Walk, Los Angeles Walk Now for Autism, the 10th annual one on Saturday. And there was at least one that I saw in the resource fair booth of sorority sisters who were currently in college that were there, that were supporting autism, and that's part of their community outreach. So I want you to know that there's a wide variety of people out there who would be willing to learn this important information and work with your child. Of course, we always say, you know, it's important that you be very careful about who you allow your child to be with, but I just want you to know that there's well-intentioned people who truly want to help, and that's a wonder. And you see it in Maddie's story and what they're accomplishing there. It's really heartwarming. Okay. We promised you that we would do a discrete trial teaching tip because I think it's so important. We on Mondays we do a little bit of talk about NET, natural environment training, but we also have to do a little bit of talking about DTT. I think that for parents, the DTT is so foreign. A lot of times we look at it and go, I don't know what that is, and I don't know how to do that, and it can be a little bit overwhelming. But Skills is a wonderful program. That way you don't have to worry about the curriculum, that you know what you're teaching, and if you do CARD e-learning, you know how to teach it. So just want to say that's what I use at home. So I'm a big fan of that. But as I was saying before, when we are starting to teach a new skill to our children, a skill that they have not been able to acquire on their own, a skill that separates them from their neurotypical developing peers, we know that they're going to need a little help and support. We can't just assume that they're going to get it on their own because they didn't. So how do we do that? And what we do is we break things into these very manageable bites. My example that I've been using the last couple of weeks is that my son learned how to tie his shoes years ago while doing ABA, and then I, like the person that I am, bought him shoes that were Velcro, and we've had Velcro shoes for the last 2 years. We just bought new shoes and they're tie again, and I'm kind of glad that we did, because what I didn't realize was that the skill wasn't being maintained. He wasn't having to do it, and so the first day he went to put his shoes on, he's like, I don't remember how to do this. And because it wasn't a skill that he had had long enough before we switched, duh. So we're having to revisit tying the shoes. And the first time that we did it, I was like, oh, honey, you know how to do this. It's just like riding a bike. And if you do it well, it isn't. Just like riding a bike for him, which another skill that's a little on the hard side for my son. So, and I got a little frustrated with it, and he got a lot frustrated. And that's when I went, ooh, let's go back to basics here. And when we first taught tying the shoes, we had a task analysis that is in Skills that, there are all these little steps along the way to teach shoe tying. And we don't necessarily have to teach them in order, but we don't want to make the mistake of teaching them all at the same time. Because what's the likelihood that we're going to have success there? None, right? There's nobody that learns how to tie shoes all in one fell swoop. Yeah, with neurotypical kids, they'll show the steps over and over and over in sequence, and eventually the kids will on their own pick up this part of it and this part of it different times, but for our children, we really want to set them up for the best possible success. So what I did was that we went back to, okay, step one, and you only have to be responsible for step one. So step one was putting the shoe on, pulling up the tongue of the shoe, and then pulling the shoe laces and not doing anything. I was like, that's all you have to do. And he says to me, that's all I have to do? That's it. And I'll tie the rest of it for you. Great. And he was like, oh, I don't mind doing that. Now, when he was younger, it was different than it is now. He's 8.5. But so I did. So for the first week, and and I didn't have to wait a week because he could do the first one, but I really wanted to diffuse the situation and not have it be adversarial. And for me, where I'm at in terms of me keeping data, it's more about, how I can do it is that I know every Monday we add another element to the shoe tying. So, I'm happy to do this, and then I would tie the rest of the shoe. Great, thanks, Mom. Very reinforcing, and I would praise him for having pulled up the tongue and say, fabulous, fabulous job. And he thought the big reinforcement was he didn't have to do the rest of it. So then the next week, I reminded him, I said, you remember how to make the X with the shoe ties and pull the one from the back through the front and pull them tight. So you can just do that part. Yeah, I can do that part. And so, I went through, because the first time he did, he's like, I don't know, it's not working. And I said, remember, you got to make the X and then put now when he was littler, we would just make the X. We took it that much in terms of task analysis, but then put it through and tighten it, okay? And then I want to definitely reinforce that. And when we're working on this pure DTT, what I would do is give him more opportunities at a time. So what I would have done is said, okay, we're just going to go back and do that part again. And we're going to do this 6 times or 7 times or 10 times. And when you do it 7 times, then you're going to get to play video games, right? That's really setting it up, saying, make the X, tie the thing, he does it, and then do it this many times and we'll give reinforcement. But in any case, we've added, you know, so, but then there's that part in the middle, the hardest part of doing the shoe tying, of putting it around and then through, which is the hardest part for anybody, right? So I'm not doing that part yet. I'm doing all the way up to that, and then I'm doing the last parts. So now he's double knotting it himself. So really all that's left is to get the go around and poke through and pull, which I'm probably going to take apart into 3 little bites, because I'm not going anywhere, right? And I would rather that he get it and get it to the point where we never have to go through this again. So in any case, looking at it from a very DTT, setting it up, this is what we're going to do, doing the task analysis on it, doing it a little bit at a time, and having the successive trials and rewarding them. I think the biggest key to success with DTT is that you prep beforehand and know exactly what you're doing. When it's NET, it's very child-driven, and you want to be really in the moment and be ready for anything, and, you know, picking your lessons on the fly, perhaps not, but, you know, using stimuli that shows up because we're in the natural environment. For DTT, there's a very set of circumstances. You're going to figure out, where in the room am I going to do this? Am I going to be seated in a chair and they're going to be seated in a chair? Are we on the floor? Are we on the couch? Are we, you know, is he sitting on the bed to do this and I'm sitting on the floor? Figure out where you want to be and what the stimuli is that you need. Well, if you're going to teach shoe tying, then you're going to need a shoe, or you're going to need 2 shoes, right? And you're going to decide for the age of the child and the ability of the child. Again, just like we were talking before about buttoning things, easier to see it when you can look at it this way, and you can always work towards looking at it the other way. So for shoe tying, we're going to start doing it with the shoes not on the feet to begin with, so that the child isn't having to fight with the leg in their face, right? Their knee up around their nose. So, you know, we're going to get the circumstances, we're going to find the place in the room where we're as distraction-free as we can, unless we're working on being distracted. And we got whatever, if it's that we need cards that have pictures of something, that we have them with us. We've got it all set up, we've gone over our teaching points, and we know what to do. I think the best thing to do, especially when you're, you know, once you've done a lesson once or twice, it's very minimal, the setup, right? But for the first time that you're going to do something with DTT, I encourage you to print out the lesson and read the teaching points the night before and start to get your stuff together. So that if you know you need 3-dimensional animals and you need 4 of them to choose from, that you've got it there with the lesson and you're ready to go. And then in the morning before you run the lesson, read through the teaching points again, so that you know exactly what you're doing and why you're doing it. And that you have your stimuli within, because your stimuli is whatever you need to help you to do the lesson, that you have it within reach. And that's when that's all set up, that's when you call the child over. Taking the time to get yourself set up and making sure that you have whatever the reinforcement is. Start with a preference assessment, so you've got your reinforcement there, and you know, in whatever way that you're working with the child to see which one they prefer, and then you put that to the side. You've got your stimuli there, you start the lesson. If you don't have the reinforcement there, what's going to happen is the child's going to do the skill at some point correctly, and you're going to have to get up and go to get whatever the toy was, and what if it's not, or the food, or whatever the reinforcement is, and what if it's not reinforcing enough for what the child just did. The child's not going to want to do it again. So set yourself up for success. Think about, you know, what you need to have together, get it all together, and that's when you call the child over. And sometimes you're going to blow it. When you blow it, catch it immediately and say, okay, I just blew that. Fix it. Don't waste time beating yourself up. Fix whatever element it is. Just don't keep blowing it, right? Learn from your mistakes. It's a really exciting thing, though, that once you see what your child can learn, you're going to want to learn more and more about doing DTT. So stick with us, because from time to time we'll cover it in different elements of what it is you need to do. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about funding before the end of the show, because the almighty dollar, it's very important with autism, and we know that nobody can afford it. Nobody can afford it, so how are we going to figure this out? Stick with us. We're going to be back in just a minute.
Hi, we're here
with Sue Cho, and she holds a lot of different jobs and responsibilities at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. We're going to have her help us with learning about nonverbal imitation and how we teach it to our children. But first, Sue, what do you do at CARD?
I'm a senior clinical supervisor, so I supervise children's cases. I'm also with the training department and provide training to the supervisors, people that are becoming supervisors or current supervisors. And then I also provide workshop services for children all over the world when they don't have access to a CARD site.
Great.
Nonverbal imitation is being able to copy the actions of another person.
You can do nonverbal imitation. What can you then go on to do?
Just about everything, because when people are social beings and we learn what to do by observing other people. When we look at children learning how to play, they are copying things that are going on in their everyday lives.
So how do we go about teaching this?
So when we first teach it, you want to start off at the most concrete level, which is copying the use of an object. You can actually touch it, you can feel it, you can see it. So for example, picking up a telephone. The child has their phone, I have my phone, and I would just pick it up and say, do this, and then the child has to copy by picking up the phone and just putting it up to their ear.
And if they don't do it,
then I would assist them. So I would first show them, do this, and then I would put it in their hand and then hold it up to their ear.
And praise them for when they do that.
And then we also want to make sure too that they're not putting the phone up to their ear when I've asked them to do something else. To start, we're just going to have the phones out, and the only thing that they can pick up is the phone. Then eventually I want to get to the point where I put other things out as well, and that they then realize that even with all these other things out, they're still able to pick up the phone when I pick up the phone. The focus of this lesson is that they observe what I do and then they copy what I did. Then we teach other items too, because we want to teach them to do multiple objects and also eventually doing multiple things with an item. So for example, let's say initially I'm teaching them to pick it up and just hold it up to their head. Maybe I also want them to understand that, oh, you dial the phone. So I might say, do this, and the child picks it up and then pretends to dial. And then eventually we start putting the actions together so they have more of a multiple sequence of activities going on so that we can teach them how to play. So for example, if I have a car, I might teach them that, okay, I'm going to start up the car. Vroom, vroom. The child imitates the sound if they have the capability of doing that. Then I'd say, okay, we're going to roll it over to the store so we both park. And then, okay, now I'm going to crash into the wall. And the child crashes into the wall so that we're able to teach multiple step sequences.
Okay. And it sounds like, again, key is getting preferred items to do this with and making it fun.
Yes, most definitely.
Not making it boring.
Yes, we want to make it interesting for the child because then they're more likely to attend and want to do it.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod, and I want to take a brief minute to talk about funding and how we pay for this journey, because it's really it's everybody's problem. And the good news about that is that we all get it, right? I've said before, I loved that a year ago, Holly Robinson Peete put out a blog about the 8 things she wished that people would know about autism. And I believe it was number 1 on her list. It was that no one can afford it. No one. That, you know, and if Holly Robinson Peete and Rodney Peete can't afford it, then you know no one can afford it, right? So we can forgive ourselves for not being able to afford it. It's just too expensive. But once we've worked through that, we need to figure out what we're going to do so that we can do what has to be done. We have to do right by our children, right? No matter how much it costs. And you know that I love to tell you, apply for a grant from ACT today. Autism Care and Treatment Today. It's act-today.org, and you can go there. I believe that they're still in a grant phase right now, and I love to suggest that you do that as soon as possible. They give money to whatever it is that families stipulate that they need. So you don't have to, it's not that kind of thing, because there are lots of places, and we'll talk about those from time to time too, that will give grant money for specific things, right? But what I love about ACT Today, Autism Care and Treatment Today, is that they give money based on what you say that you need. Okay, and it is extensive paperwork. I'm just going to be honest with you that you need to fill out so that they can see that there is genuine need, but do it. Fill out the paperwork. There's a waiting list, but you might as well fill it out, right? There's other organizations that you can apply for grants, and other organizations that you can do for loans, and we feature them from time to time. But I promised you that today that we would talk about fundraising when you do a fundraiser for yourself. And I really want you to think in terms of what that could do for you. And you'll see people that do it from time to time, and they do it in hundreds of different ways, and you really want to do it in a way that is specific to what you need and what you have going for you and what you have access to. So, I mean, I've seen parents who were able, because they had connections to, say, the local, whether it's a softball league, that it's just amateur softball league, or somebody who knew a player who played on the minor league team, that they create a day that people can pay an extra 25 cents for their hot dog at the hot dog stand, and it all goes to this family. So there are organizations that if you have an in with somebody, that you can say to them, hey, can we do something together? And I know it feels difficult to ask, but I tell you quite honestly that when we did our fundraiser, people thanked us. People thanked us and said, thank you so much. I have not known what to do to help you. And I have to tell you, that was a really, talk about mind-changing and world-changing and life-changing, that I had not stopped to think about the fact that they were having an experience as well. We were experiencing the devastation of, oh my gosh, and the fear of we don't know what's going to happen, but our friends and family were experiencing something else too. And I know, having been on the other side, that when friends and family have been diagnosed with cancer, you know, first and foremost, you're thinking about them and their family, but you're having a reaction yourself as well. And I had not realized that everybody was having that reaction with my son having autism. So, and they thanked us. They thanked us and said, thank you for the opportunity to do something for you. I've wanted to do something for you. And I thought, I'm just going to be honest here, and hopefully none of them are watching, I thought they just didn't care. I thought they were going about their day, that here we were, that we got stuck with, this mess, and that everybody else was just going about their day. And I hadn't realized they just didn't know what to do. So sometimes we can tell people, here is what I need. Can you help? So it could be something that you pair with an organization. Remember that they get something out of it too, because it's publicity for them. I hate to put it in that light, but it's the truth, and you got to know what it is that you're offering. And it's a great cause to help one child, and there are organizations and businesses that love the opportunity to do that. If you don't know anybody, I will tell you that realtors love that. Because they like to be known in the community and to be helping people. So, go to your realtor and say, hey, we need to do a fundraiser. Do you have any suggestions? And it can be, for us, I've said this before, you look at what your resources are, and we know a lot of talented people. We live in Los Angeles, and we know a lot of actors, and so we went to them and we did a show. And we found an organization that, a restaurant that needed some PR and some business, and they said, you can use our facilities for free, but we're going to insist that everybody order at least an appetizer. Okay. And people were thrilled to be able to do that, and people donated. So we had a silent auction and did a show, and it was a lovely event. We had a really good time, and I felt incredibly supported. And it was a very specific group of our friends. So we didn't tap everybody that, that we could have, but it was a very specific group here in Los Angeles. And there were a couple of people who were far away who sent and donated things from their circle of friends. There were some really exciting things in our private auction. But I know other people that have done fundraisers, whether, it's on Facebook or, and sent it out to people and said, I think it's good to not just say, hey, we're asking for people to donate money, but to offer something in return. But it can't be something that costs you money, that you either get that from a business, that you know, there's an organization by me that they make chocolate bars, and they do it for businesses as a PR thing, so they can put a picture on a chocolate bar. I don't know how they do it, but it's a really cool thing, and they can make the wrapper and everything. And they like to do weddings and new businesses and things like that. And I know somebody else, it wasn't autism, but went to them and said, I need to fundraise for this child who needs this kind of treatment. Again, it wasn't autism, but the chocolate bar company said, we would be happy to do that. And so they made chocolate bars with a picture of the child, and you could buy them for like $1.50. And they had donated all the chocolate bars. Well, it was a great publicity thing for them, and they got a whole bunch of business from it. And people said, and there was a little thing on the label that said, these chocolate bars have been provided by, and if you would like to buy these for a wedding or a business opening or any kind of an event. And they more than made the money back because the cost of the chocolate bars, because they brought in all this business, and the family got this money for treatment. You know, there's things like gift cards and stuff that if you can send out a thing to people and say if there's something specific that you're saving for, whether it's a fence or something else, you can make arrangements with that company and say, hey, would you be willing to match if we had people donating and coming to your business? And then you put out a big blast to everybody and say, you know, we're taking donations for a fence because our child is eloping, and that's the thing that we really need. And this fence company has agreed to pay, you know, however much is donated, they'll pay that much back in kind, but you have to drop the money off, and they'll take anything from a quarter up to whatever. It's really interesting and amazing because there are people out there who want to donate, and if you put it out and say, here is what we're doing, people get very excited and want to participate. They want to do something, and everybody will do the thing that they can. But don't be afraid to ask. Get creative. And if you really can't think of what it is that you want to do for a fundraiser, write to me. Let's brainstorm together about what business you want to go to and what you want to do so that it's something that you can actually make some money and have some fun in the meantime and give people an opportunity to support you. They want to. They really and truly want to. Okay, we're here at the end of the show, and so many things that we talked about. We're going to keep talking about challenging behavior all week long, and we're going to hit that a little bit harder tomorrow. Then we will be here on Wednesday as well. On Wednesday, Evelyn Gould will be in here at the 10 o'clock hour. She's a wonderful, fabulous BCBA, and also at 11 o'clock, Nancy Allspaw Jackson will be joining me, and we will be playing some of those interviews from the Walk Now, the Los Angeles Walk Now for Autism that we went to on Saturday. So that's Wednesday. Then we aren't doing live shows on this Thursday or Friday. I am going to upstate New York to adjudicate a drama festival at my alma mater, and it looks like I might have an opportunity to get together with some people at an autism walk in Oswego, New York on Saturday briefly before I fly back out. So that's a very exciting thing, and I'm thrilled to have an opportunity, hopefully, to be able to do that. But then we'll be back in the studio at 9 a.m. on Monday morning to do a full week. So this week is a little bit short, but remember that on Thursday and Friday we will rebroadcast past episodes. So all of that and more. Also want to remind you that even as this show ends, the conversation continues. If there's something that we talked about today that we breezed over, something I said that you agreed with, didn't agree with, want more information about, or feel that I was completely wrong, heaven knows sometimes I am. There's the email address. Write to me and tell me what I said that you want more information about, where I missed the boat completely, what you like, what you don't like, what you wish you were seeing here, because we're here to support you. And if we're not getting that done, we'd like to know how we're not getting it done so that we can do a better job. Do us a favor and let us know what you need. I've said this before, and I'm going to say it a bunch more. And by the way, Emily's going to start to scroll through all the different ways that you can get in touch with us, okay? And all the different ways that you can watch the show. But I want to remind you that ABA is the only scientifically proven effective treatment for autism. If you're having trouble getting ABA, please, will you do me a favor and write to me and tell me what you think your biggest challenge is? Because that's what I want to work on. I can't go everywhere and I can't solve everybody's problems, but if you write to me and say, this seems to be our biggest challenge, I want to be able to come back to you with some potential solutions. I want you to know that you're supported in this. I want you to know that there are people in your corner and that I'm one of them. But help me to know what I can do to be able to help you. So if we can have that agreement, I just can't help but think that we can get someplace. If your child is engaging in challenging behavior, don't just accept it. We can work on these challenging behaviors. We can change them. We can give them different behaviors that work better for them. So if we stick together and we share information, I think that together we can all get someplace further. We know that progress is possible for all of our kids, not just the ones who are high functioning. So stick with us here on Autism Live. Watch us in the many ways that you can, but please be a part of the conversation. We're going to be back tomorrow at 9 a.m. for an exciting show, but until then, please give your kiddos a hug from me. Bye-bye for now.